Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. Old Wolverine, do whatever he wants. Chapter 1. The night sky was as dark as ink, and the flashing neon lights of the nightclub illuminated the most prosperous street in the entire town. There was an endless stream of vehicles on the street, and the most eye-catching one was a black Chrysler parked in front of the nightclub. "Sir, please walk slowly, and remember to give a 5-star review on Uber." Logan Howlett watched the guests walk into the nightclub before closing the car door, smoothing his cheap suit, getting back in the car and driving away. The car passed through the bustling streets, all the way out of the town, and galloped on the wasteland avenue. As the night deepened, the roads outside the city were sparsely populated and slightly deserted. The wind blew from time to time, rolling up the yellow soil on the ground, covering the already not so clean vehicles with a layer of dust. Ding dong. The mobile phone screen suddenly lit up, and a text message came in. "Caliban, the professor's medicine is running out." Logan drove with one hand, looked at the text message, and sighed helplessly. "I'll find a way." He typed a response with one hand, his face full of exhaustion. The professor's medicine was running out again. Without the suppression of the medicine, once he got sick, it would be an unimaginable disaster. Logan put down his phone and touched his pocket. Alas! The shrunken wallet made him sigh helplessly. How long has it been since he traveled through time? He couldn't remember it a little, and even his previous memories gradually blurred with the passage of time. He only remembered that his surname was not Howlett, but Luo, an ordinary person in China. At that time, Wolverine 3 Inches was in theaters. As an X-Men fan, he also paid a box office for this movie and witnessed the tragic life of the old Wolverine in the theater. Unexpectedly, after waking up from a sleep, he traveled to the X-Men universe and became Logan Howlett. At the beginning of the time travel, Professor X's tragedy in Westchase had not happened, and mutants had not yet gone extinct. Logan tried hard to prevent the tragedy from happening, but it backfired. Even though he knew some of the events in advance and tried his best to prevent Professor X from accidentally losing control. But in the end, he couldn't do it. Professor X's loss of control in Westchase caused hundreds of deaths. This incident shocked the whole country, and people's fear of mutants deepened to the extreme. The government, which was already afraid of mutants, took the opportunity to impose compulsory control on mutants and developed drugs for genetic defects, making mutants unable to reproduce, trying to completely erase the existence of mutants. Logan, who came through time, was also powerless to save the situation. The tragedy of Uncle Wolf in his old age seemed to be reappearing again. Logan looked at himself in the rearview mirror. His gradually vicissitudes of life were full of exhaustion, and the thick beard that had no time to take care of grew wildly like a steel needle, and his messy hair and temples were already a little gray. The old hands holding the steering wheel looked like a piece of tree bark. Looking at this, Logan had a complicated expression. Beep beep. The dashboard suddenly gave a reminder, and the fuel tank, which was about to run out, reflected a scarlet light. Logan slammed the steering wheel irritably. Years of escape and the departure of relatives and friends around him made him anxious and irritable, and he often got restless because of some trivial things. Fortunately, there are many motels in this desert. This kind of motel that integrates hotels, restaurants and gas stations is very common in St. Anthony. Logan has lived in Texas for many years and has long been a frequent visitor. He drove the car to the door of a hotel with a sign on, turned off the engine and got out of the car, and pushed the door in with ease. "James, I haven't seen you for 2 days." Uncle Crew at the front desk put down the wiped wine glass, stretched out his hand and greeted Logan with a smile. James is another name for Logan. After all, the name of Logan Howlett has been on the wanted list for a long time. As a desperado who needs to hide his identity, it is obviously inappropriate to make his real name public. "Haven't seen me for 2 days, have you been burning with desire?" Logan threw the car keys to the clerk beside him and asked him to refuel his car. He sat in front of the counter, same old, a bottle of wine. There are too many troubles in life, so he has to use alcohol to numb the messy troubles in his heart. Alcohol has gradually become an indispensable spiritual pillar in his life. Drunk driving is not good. Crew laughed and teased, but still turned around and took out a bottle of wine from the wine rack and handed it over. Logan took the wine and was not in a hurry to drink it. The spokesperson of the wine on the bottle caught his attention. The tight-fitting battle suit with blue, red and white interlaced outlines the muscle lines of the spokesperson perfectly. He dragged the vibranium round shield in one hand and held a bottle of wine in the other hand, with a smile on his face. The new spokesperson, Captain America. Crew followed Logan's gaze and reminded him with a chuckle. I thought he would be the ambassador of Prohibition. Logan bit open the bottle and sneered in response. The aroma of the wine filled his nose. It was also after a long time of crossing that Logan realized that the universe he was in had some subtle changes from the X-Men universe he had seen in the movie before. This is not just a new timeline of the X-Men, but a timeline that also has the existence of the Avengers. It is now 2012, which is the time when the Avengers rose. It is a pity that the Avengers did not exist during the glorious period of the X-Men, so the two sides did not have any intersection. But the funny thing is that people only know the Avengers. The streets are full of Avengers posters and news programs. But no one knows that the X-Men have also shed blood for this country and this land, and even for saving the world. Under the deliberate exaggeration of the government, the mutants in people's impression have gradually become a group of unstable factors that endanger social security. It's hard to say. Captain Rogers was a soldier. You know, in their time, alcohol was an indispensable material on the battlefield. Crew shrugged and explained. Captain America is a product of World War II. In that era, alcohol became the only choice for soldiers to charge forward without fear. Logan didn't speak. Look, people only know Captain America, but don't know that Wolverine withstood the bombing of the atomic bomb in World War II. He shook his head and sighed, raised his head and filled his mouth with a big mouthful of wine. The hot liquor slid down his throat and went down his stomach, as if the fatigue of the day also disappeared, and the alcohol that surged into his mind slightly awakened this already exhausted body. Soon, most of the bottle of wine was gone. Bang! A gunshot rang out suddenly, and the harsh sound was particularly loud in this silent wilderness. Crew was startled, and the wine glass he was wiping fell on the bar, but he had no time to pay attention, and suddenly looked up at the door. What's going on? Logan suddenly remembered that his car was still outside, and the gas clerk had not returned yet. He felt something was wrong and turned around to check. San Antonio is not a good place. Every year, countless Mexicans and illegal immigrants run into Texas, and many of them choose San Antonio. These guys without identity and jobs have made the whole San Antonio a mess, and there are few competent stupid policemen who only take taxpayers' money, which makes criminals more unscrupulous and crimes rampant. Robbery at night has almost become one of the few means of survival for Mexicans and hungry illegal immigrants. It is not new that there are a few unclaimed bodies outside the wilderness every day. Boy, hand over the keys, quickly. 5 Mexicans surrounded the black Chrysler, and their black skin almost blended into the wilderness. One of them held a steaming pistol in his hand and pointed it at the frightened clerk, threatening him to hand over the keys. Hey, man, that Chrysler can't seat 5 people, and it's worthless. Logan cursed as he walked out of the door and strode forward. Crew, who was following closely behind him, looked panicked and reminded, James, be careful. He knew that these Mexicans were all desperate criminals who often did these shady things in the wilderness, and even many people had died under their guns. They were a group of murderous villains. Old man, is this car yours? The Mexicans turned their attention to Logan. The man with the gun pointed the gun at Logan without hesitation, with contempt in his eyes. Obviously, they didn't take this old man who looked over 50 and was drunk seriously. Of course, Logan's eyes were a little confused, and the alcohol took over his brain at an inappropriate time, but fortunately he was still conscious. He reached out from his pocket and took out $500 and handed them over. Take them and leave, no one will call the police here, and no one will get hurt. Years of escape life have washed away a lot of the violence in his heart, and he didn't want to cause trouble at this critical moment. The old Mexicans saw the money, and their eyes brightened. But it was obvious that their greed was not limited to this. The old Mexican with a gun laughed and said, Old man, kill you, the car and money are ours. They committed many crimes, and at least 7 or 8 people died in their hands. They didn't mind taking more lives. Besides, there were many old men with corpses in the wilderness, and the police were too lazy to investigate. The reaction of the old Mexicans made Crew's heart tighten. James. As soon as his voice fell, a gunshot came instantly. Bang! The harsh sound echoed in the wilderness. The old Mexican holding the gun had already pulled the trigger wildly, his expression still playful. The life of an old man was obviously insignificant. Logan cursed, and his body almost reacted subconsciously, twisting his head to the left. The whistling bullet was wrapped in scorching heat, almost brushing his ears, and hit the wall of the hotel behind him fiercely, leaving a steaming black bullet hole. For a moment, the surroundings were completely silent, and everyone stared at Logan in amazement. The old Mexicans looked at Logan, who turned his head, and then looked at the pistol with steam coming out of the muzzle in his hand, and felt that their heads exploded immediately. He actually dodged the bullet. The original fearlessness gradually dissipated, and looking at Logan, who was gradually getting angry, inexplicable fear grew in the hearts of the 5 people. Crew was also stunned, staring at Logan's back in disbelief. He always thought that James was just a drunken private car driver. But now, this guy's identity is obviously not simple. Since you don't want to talk properly, let's change the way. Logan's eyes were gloomy, and he clenched his fists with gritted teeth. 3 small holes gradually tore between his finger bones, as if something was about to come out. Logan clenched his fists and stared coldly at the 5 old men in front of him. This body is old, but he is not a fish on the chopping block. A few old Mo with guns can bully him at will. Boy, come on together. Loganson stared at the few people coldly, and before waiting for the gun-wielding Lao Mo to pull the trigger again, he slammed his back foot on the ground, jumped up high, like an old wolf pounced on his prey, and hit Lao Mo hard with his huge face. He did not reveal his steel claws. On the one hand, his old body prevented him from extending his steel claws, and on the other hand, he did not want to reveal his identity. The characteristics of the steel claws are too obvious. Once word spreads, the group of guys who want to put mutants to death may immediately notice San Antonio. He doesn't want to give up this relatively peaceful life yet. But even if he didn't use the steel claws, the strength from his muscles and fists could still beat old Mo until his nose was broken, his eyes turned white, and he fell straight in front of Logan and passed out. Oh my God! Crew, who was hiding half of his body behind the hotel door, was stunned. I really underestimated James before. This alcoholic chauffeur probably has many unknown past events. The other 4 Lao Mo looked at the leader, who fell on the ground with blood oozing from his mouth and nose, and they were a little confused for a moment. After looking at each other, the 4 of them swallowed subconsciously. He is alone. One of them suddenly shouted, "Come together." The 4 of them immediately took out their sticks from their pockets and swung them violently, then strode towards Logan. Lao Mo, who was rushing at the front, raised his black swing stick high and slammed it down on Logan's head without hesitation. But Logan ducked out of the way, and the stick fell into the air. Before old Mo could stop his hand, Logan's huge fist quickly swung out and hit old Mo directly in the abdomen. With just one punch, Lao Mo's abdomen was dented. The huge force knocked him back several meters, and he lay on the ground clutching his stomach and groaning in pain. When the other 3 Lao Mo saw this, their expressions changed suddenly, but they had no time to pay attention to the situation of their companions. They waved their sticks together, trying to subdue Logan in one fell swoop. But the arm of one of them was tightly grasped by Logan's suddenly extended palm. The big hands, like iron pincers, firmly controlled old Mo's arm. Logan grabbed Lao Mo's arm and blocked a swinging stick coming from the other side. At the same time, he took advantage of the situation and hit Lao Mo's chest with his elbow. Click! There was a crisp sound, and old Mo's chest was visibly dented, his ribs were broken, and he fell to the ground wailing dully. Logan reached out his palm again, grabbed the neck of the old Mo on the left, lifted him up like a chicken, and swung him far away. Old Mo seemed to be a kite with its string cut off, and it flew more than 10 meters. He fell heavily to the ground, and his life or death was unknown. At this time, an old Mo had quietly come up behind Logan, swinging his stick and hitting Logan hard on his thick back. As expected, Logan fell to the ground in pain but did not appear. Old Mo felt as if he had hit a steel plate, his palms were numb from the shock, and the stick in his hand was bent a lot. Seeing this scene, Lao Mo's eyes were full of horror. He completely lost his mind to fight and turned around to run away. But how could Logan give him this opportunity? He stretched out his hand and grabbed old Mo's shoulder. He swung out his other hand without hesitation, knocking Old Mo away several meters and falling to the ground. In just 2 minutes, the 4 Old Mos completely lost their ability to resist. Lao Mo, who was hit in the abdomen first, seemed unwilling to give up and struggled to crawl towards the pistol that fell on the ground. But Logan just glanced at him and suddenly raised his foot and stepped down. The pistol was instantly trampled to pieces. Seeing this scene, Old Mo suddenly broke into a cold sweat. Only then did he know that Logan still had to hold back, otherwise he would be able to twist off their heads with his strength. Get as far as you can. Logan left a cold sentence. The 4 fallen Lao Mo didn't dare to say anything, so they hurriedly got up from the ground, carried their unconscious eldest brother on their backs, and fled as fast as they could, disappearing into the night after a while. Looking at the backs of the 5 people, Logan looked disdainful. He took out the cigarette case from his arms, lit a cigarette, blew out a smoke ring, and coldly snorted, "You can rob someone with just a gun. But this is normal. In the liberal United States, where guns are free, basically every household has 1 or 2 guns. However, the control of concealed pistols and fully automatic rifles is very strict. It seems that these veterans must have spent a lot of money to get such a pistol." James, another drink, crew, who hid half of his body behind the door, hesitated to speak, and finally did not ask. He was certain that the guy who called himself James definitely had a story. But in a place like San Antonio, which is a mixed bag, this situation is not uncommon. "One more drink," Logan said, and was about to turn around and go back to the hotel, but a sudden sound in his mind stopped him. "Wait a minute, I seem to be drunk." "You dare to resist and don't become a fish on the chopping board." Prestige +1. Logan looked at the dark blue panel that appeared in front of him and couldn't help but be stunned. He shook his head and felt the cold night wind blowing against his face. After making sure that he had not drunk too much, his whole body suddenly felt a little down. "It seems that only I can see this thing." Endurance 6. Strength 7. Agility 7. Speed 7. Intelligence 5. Defense 7. Willpower 10. Fighting skills 7. Prestige Special 1. Special attributes none. Special abilities self-healing factor. Current physical condition gradually weakened, in poor condition. Current free attribute points 0. What does it mean? Logan stared at the data panel that suddenly appeared and noticed the small words at the bottom of the panel. Except for special values, the normal values of other data indicators are 5. Increase prestige and get corresponding rewards. Note: gaining prestige in the tribe doubles the effect. Rewards include free attributes, special abilities, special attributes, etc. Logan looked at these small words and took a while to react. Am I awakening a new ability? Possessing multiple abilities is not common among mutants, but it does not mean that there are none. Some mutants, in addition to the mutant abilities that appear at birth, may also awaken some new abilities during their growth. Jean Grey of Xavier's School of Geniuses had 2 mutant abilities, one was mind control and the other was thought control. However, Logan did not expect that he could awaken new abilities at his age. According to the new ability insights that came into his mind, it is linked to the tribe. By improving the prestige in the mutant tribe, one can improve one's own strength and obtain freedom attributes. Moreover, gaining prestige from ordinary people can also improve oneself, but the effect is lower than that of the mutant tribe. After completing the understanding of the new ability, Logan's stunned face was gradually covered with joy. His current situation is really bad. His increasing age, coupled with the corrosion of external factors, makes his body worse day by day. What's more, the situation of mutants is like a street rat. He is also wanted by the government. With the elderly Charles Xavier by his side, he has to live a miserable life every day. No one wants to die with regrets, especially Logan. Even years of torture can't dull his passion. "Are you still drinking?" Crew looked at Logan, who suddenly stopped, thinking that he was worried that the gunshot would attract the police, and said with a smile, "This is a place. If we don't call the police, no one will come to take care of it." "Drink." Logan's weathered face smiled, but he didn't answer, just laughed and responded, "I won't go home until I'm drunk tonight." The emergence of new abilities made him see a new dawn, and he drank until late at night. It was not until the early hours of the morning that he left the hotel with the bottle of wine and staggered back to the car to rest. As an Uber driver in recent years, he rarely went back to home. The so-called home was actually an abandoned old factory. There was no warmth of home, and coupled with the busy work, he mostly spent the night in the car. In the back seat of the car, Logan lay through the skylight and looked up at the stars. The starlight tonight was different from before. The stars looked particularly bright, and the night breeze was particularly comfortable. The sky was white. The blinding light hit Logan's drunken face, and his tightly closed eyes slowly opened. Last night's heavy drinking made him look a little unwell. He squinted his hazy eyes and stretched out his withered palms to block the dazzling sunlight. After his eyes adjusted to the current light, he pushed open the car door and returned to the motel. The hotel was open 24 hours a day, but Crew had already finished his night shift the day before, and a young man who looked only in his early 20s replaced him. Open an hourly room. Logan dropped a few dollars at the front desk, took the key handed over by the young man, and walked to the room according to the house number on the key. He needed to take a shower. He was sweaty yesterday, and his cheap suit was full of sweat and alcohol. If he went out to drive to pick up customers like this, he would be complained by customers. In the bathroom, Logan took off his suit, revealing his tendon meat and the hideous scars on his body. Some of his genes contain self-healing factors. Normally, no matter how severe the penetrating wound is, it can be healed in a short time. However, due to some irreversible reasons, the effect of the self-healing factor has also faded visibly. Even if many injuries can be recovered, they will still leave scars. Logan stood in front of the mirror and looked at the hideous body. He turned on the radio in the toilet. At this time, the radio was broadcasting boring morning news. He looked at his appearance in the mirror, and then looked down at his hands. He clenched his fists a little harder, and 3 holes slowly appeared between his fists. 3 steel claws flashing with cold light slowly extended from them. However, due to his aging, the steel claws that could be extended at will in the past only showed their heads and could no longer be extended. Logan stared at the steel claws, stretched out his other hand without hesitation, held them tightly, and pulled them out with force. Hiss! The sharp steel claws instantly cut through his palm, and the bright red blood dripped. The stinging pain of the torn palm instantly awakened his still somewhat confused brain. But he ignored it, and the panel appeared with a thought. Current physical condition, gradually weakening, in poor condition. Logan looked at the content on the panel and suddenly noticed that there was a detailed information next to this line of text. Your body is gradually aging, the adamantium alloy is poisoning and devouring your health, and genetically modified food is suppressing your X gene. Cough, cough, cough. The sudden violent cough made Logan retract the panel, covering his mouth and cursing. Although he is a mutant, aging is inevitable. In the past, the self-healing factor in the body would slow down aging and extend its lifespan indefinitely. But after the government developed defective genes for mutants and put them into food, these genetically modified foods are almost all over the world. Logan and other mutants inevitably ingest genetically modified foods, which causes the X gene in their bodies to be suppressed, and the self-healing factor is also affected by it, and the effect is obviously gradually weakening. Of course, he can also choose to eat only pure natural food. But the government has long guessed the mutants' ideas and taken precautions. It has long been rumored that artificial rainfall also contains substances that suppress the X gene. It can be said that as long as you live in this world, you will inevitably be corroded by genetically modified substances. In addition, the adamantium alloys in your body that can greatly enhance your combat effectiveness are now an unavoidable problem for him. In the past, there was a self-healing factor, and the poisoning of the adamantium alloy was minimal. But now it is different from the past. The self-healing factor is gradually declining and can no longer suppress the toxins of the adamantium alloy, causing his body to gradually weaken visibly. The radio broadcast today's morning news, and the host and guests continued to chat and joke in the live broadcast. Josh, the weather is great today. Yes, host. Red Pants won the championship yesterday. Even if it was cloudy, the sky was clear. Okay, today's topic is mutants. Mutants, they sound familiar. Are they some new superheroes? No, they are a very distant group, but there seems to be no news about them in the past decade. Endangered species. A good analogy, Josh, they are just like Indians. I remembered the host. I seem to have seen related news when I was a child. They seem to be very dangerous. Of course, but the good news is that mutants are dying out. Extinction will be inevitable. This group of dangerous guys will become history. Quote. Bang. Logan decisively hung up the radio, his eyes full of coldness. Extinction. Extinction. Logan sighed deeply, his face gradually helpless. Perhaps the news is right. The era of mutants is over. Under the suppression of genetically modified substances, mutants can no longer give birth to offspring. Not only do they suppress mutants physically, they also use such means to try to completely exterminate them. Logan slammed the porcelain basin he was washing his hands in, venting his self-blame. He could have changed everything, but in the end, everything ended in tragedy. Cheer up. Logan looked up at himself in the mirror. Although the person in the mirror looked like an old man with a long illness. But under those old eyes, he regained vitality today. The awakening of new abilities gave him new hope. He was unwilling to give up. After bandaging the wound on his palm that was cut by the steel claws, Logan changed into a clean cheap suit after taking a shower and strode out of the hotel. At the same time, he took out his mobile phone and called an unmarked number. I want to buy medicine, see you at the old place. Without waiting for the other party to respond, Logan hung up the phone, got in the car and started the ignition. The professor was very ill and needed medicine to suppress it all year round. But now he is a wanted criminal, and it is impossible for him to register and buy it with his identity. It is even more impossible for the hospital's prescription drugs to be sold openly to a wanted criminal. But fortunately, this is San Antonio, a place where nothing is surprising. There are many ways to get medicine, and it is also very common for a batch of medicines to be lost inexplicably in the hospital every day. Of course, the medicines purchased in this way are usually far higher than the market price. Logan did not make much money as an Uber driver, and most of his monthly salary was used to buy medicine for the professor. But he had to do it. The professor was very ill. Without the suppression of drugs, the professor's brain was a bomb that could explode at any time. For the professor and for safety, he could only run around the streets of San Antonio. Especially when he touched his empty wallet. As for leaving the professor alone, Logan had never thought about it, because the professor had not abandoned him at the beginning. Bang! Logan had just started the car and was about to shift gears to leave when the passenger door suddenly opened. A man in a black suit got in without hesitation, looking back nervously, and kept urging Logan, drive quickly. Logan glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a group of gunmen rushing towards this side. It seems that this guy has caused a lot of trouble. Sir, I don't want to cause trouble. Logan looked at the man in the suit and spoke calmly. $1,000, take me away from here. The man stared at the back, his tone unquestionable. 1,000. Logan couldn't help but calculate the benefits. $1,000, minus the gas, an Uber driver would need 10 days to earn that much. Logan was tempted, but he still turned off the engine and held out his hand, 5,000. The man looked at Logan who was raising the price, and finally nodded helplessly, deal. Logan smiled, hold on tight. Restarted the ignition, and the black Chrysler quickly fled from here. He didn't want to cause trouble. But now, having no money in his pocket is his biggest trouble. On the desert road, yellow wind and sand swept past. The black car broke through the wind and sand and drove quickly on the road. Behind the car, several motorcycles were driving side by side, occupying almost the entire road. The motorcycle engine roared and roared, chasing the car in front. The members on the car shouted and raised their guns, like a group of hunters chasing their prey. Who are they? Logan held the steering wheel tightly with both hands. He had pushed the car's gear to the extreme and stepped on the accelerator completely. The car whizzed like a blade cutting through the wind and sand. He looked through the rearview mirror at the group of crazy guys behind him and couldn't help but ask. A few fools from a motorcycle gang. The man in a black suit sat in the passenger seat, holding the handle firmly with his hand, looking disgusted. Is it them? Logan has also heard about the motorcycle gang. They are a group of riders who hang out in the desert. They often engage in highway robbery. To put it bluntly, they are desert bandits. However, highway robbery seems to be just a sideline business of motorcycle gangs. They mainly operate the tavern industry. Many taverns in the desert have motorcycle gang backgrounds. Highway robbery is more like the entertainment behavior of a group of lunatics. Watch the front. The man in the suit suddenly pointed to the road ahead and made a sharp crackling sound. Logan turned his sights on the rearview mirror back to the road, and saw two pickup trucks suddenly appearing in front of the avenue. They crossed the road in the middle, completely blocking the entire road. Logan cursed and quickly turned the steering wheel. The vehicle turned around like it was drifting, rushed off the road, and raced on the desolate desert. The yellow sand rolled up by the wheels looked like a sandstorm. However, the guys from the motorcycle gang don't seem to be planning to give up on the big fish of men in suits. They also turned around and whizzed through the wind and sand, chasing after him. Bang bang bang. The sudden sound of gunfire covered up the roar of the engine, making it particularly harsh in this wilderness. In the rearview mirror, Logan could clearly see that the madman on the back seat of the motorcycle gang had stood up, holding his companion's shoulder with one hand and holding a gun with the other, and kept shooting at the car. Bang bang. Logan felt the car body shaking violently, and suddenly felt bad. When he looked back, he saw that the rear seat window had been hit by a bullet, and the tempered glass instantly cracked like a spider web. The intensive barrage fire made the entire car body buzz. FAQ, my car. Logan's eyes were filled with distress. No customer wants to ride in a car with bullet holes in it that makes them think the driver is a thug. And the money to repair the car is a huge expense, which is simply unacceptable to Logan now. Logan held the steering wheel with one hand and took out a pistol from the drawer with the other hand and threw it to the man in the suit. Kill them. When he is unwilling to expose the steel claws, the straightforward deterrent effect of the pistol can easily dissuade some gangsters, so even if it is rarely used, Logan will put it somewhere within easy reach. The man in the suit was obviously a little surprised that Logan suddenly pulled out a pistol, but he still loaded it skillfully, holding the grip in one hand and holding the pistol out the window with the other, constantly pulling the trigger to fight back at the motorcycle gang behind him. But this is not a smooth road after all. The vehicle was driving rapidly on the desert full of rocks, and the wind and sand rolled up made it possible for people to open their mouths and fill their mouths with dust. The violently shaking car made it impossible for the man in a suit, who was not very proficient in shooting skills, to aim. After a few rounds of bullets were fired, he was miles away from the target. Bang bang bang. The madman from the motorcycle gang continued to shoot. Logan could see several more clear bullet holes in the car through the rearview mirror, which made him completely furious. He grabbed the gun from the man in the suit and shouted, "I'll do it." When the man in the suit saw that Logan's hands were about to leave the steering wheel, his expression suddenly turned pale. "I'll pay for the repairs, so quickly put your hands on this steering wheel." Compared to the crazy shooting of the crazy group of motorcycle gangs, he was more afraid that the vehicle would roll over at this speed. Logan ignored the man in the suit's warning, held the steering wheel with one hand, and leaned half of his body out of the window. The howling wind completely messed up his cheap suit, and his messy hair was instantly covered with a thick layer of yellow sand. The car shook violently, twisting wildly in the desert like a dragon wagging its tail, and it might roll over at any time. At this speed and in such an environment, once it rolls over, the entire car will be scrapped instantly, and the passengers will die from the violent impact as soon as it rolls over. The man in the suit's face was pale, his breathing was rapid, his hands were tightly holding the handle, and his whole body was curled up on the chair. He felt that Logan was 100 times crazier than those crazy motorcycle gangs. However, Logan didn't care and aimed at the group of crazy guys behind him in a weird posture. Bang! After a crisp gunshot, a clear bloody hole appeared on the forehead of a motorcycle driver. The unbalanced motorcycle fell over and rolled violently in the wilderness. The two people on the car were thrown away. The huge inertia caused their bodies to be instantly torn apart by the stones in the wilderness. Although Logan is famous for his steel claws, he was a veteran of World War II before that, and he has not forgotten the firearm skills engraved in his bones. Bang bang bang. After several consecutive shots, all 5 motorcycles fell over. In such an environment and speed, it was basically impossible to survive the accident. The bodies would be completely covered by the yellow sand in a short time. No one is chasing me. Logan sat back down, threw the gun onto the passenger seat, leisurely took out a cigarette, lit it with the car's cigarette lighter, and blew out a puff of smoke. You are such a madman. The man in a suit sat in the passenger seat and gasped for breath. The thrill just now left him still frightened. Don't forget, the money to repair the car, Logan just said indifferently and controlled the car back to the main road. Without the pursuit of the motorcycle gang, there would be no more interruptions along the way, and the car entered the city of Santa Fe in a short while. Once here, the situation of the man in the suit is completely safe. Motorcycle gangs rarely dare to cause trouble in Santa Fe City. Dude, thanks. In front of a construction company, a man in a suit got out of the car and handed a thick envelope, $10,000, and the other $5,000 is enough to repair the car. Although this guy is crazy, the man in the suit is willing to pay for such peace and quiet. Logan took the envelope and simply glanced at it without counting it on the street. The principle of keeping wealth private applies everywhere, especially in a place like this. The man in the suit did not leave directly, but took out his business card from his arms and handed it over. My name is Chris Lawrence. If you want to do big business in the future, you can contact me. Lawrence. Logan remembered that the most famous family in Santa Fe City also had the surname Lawrence. This family was not a simple family. They believed in both black and white and had a great reputation in Santa Fe City. That's right, it's the Lawrence you think of. Chris Lawrence smiled and said, we'll see you again if we have the opportunity to work together again. Logan looked at the business card in his hand and had an idea for a moment. Maybe it's time to consider changing jobs. His previous plan was to buy a boat and take the professor to live on the sea. In the vast ocean, even if the professor loses control, the risk can be minimized. But now the awakening of his new ability made him give up this idea. Instead of living an ignoble existence in the vast ocean, what he should do is to restore the glory of his tribe and get rid of this situation at this stage. And the money required for this goal cannot be supported by an Uber driver. Now he can hardly even afford the professor's medication. Putting the business card away, Logan drove to the hospital and parked not far from the hospital's garbage passage and waited quietly. After waiting in the car for a while, I saw a caregiver sneaking out. Logan got out of the car decisively, walked up as if nothing had happened, and walked side by side with the caregiver. Look ahead, don't look at me. The caregiver kept looking forward, trying not to look so conspicuous. Medicine. Logan didn't look at him and responded in a low voice. 2,000. The nurse whispered, her voice unmistakable. Are you crazy? It used to be 1,050. Logan was very dissatisfied with the nurse's quote. It was a full $500 more expensive than before. This was several days' wages for him. Nowadays, hospitals have stricter control over drugs. It is normal for prices to increase. Even a cent less than 2,000 yuan will not suffice. The nurse tightened the bottle of medicine in his pocket. As long as the price could not be negotiated, he would turn around and leave without hesitation. Logan reluctantly took out $2,000 and quickly stuffed it into the caregiver's pocket. The nurse also stuffed the medicine bottle in his pocket into Logan's pocket at lightning speed, and the two parted ways. Back in the car, Logan took out the medicine in his pocket and checked it carefully. After confirming that there was no problem, he decisively started the car and quickly drove out of the city. All the way across the desert highway, beyond the border is Mexico. The car stopped outside an abandoned factory. In front of an abandoned house in the factory, Logan pushed open the rusty iron door. The rusty door bolt made a sharp creaking sound when the door was pushed open. In the messy house, a pale man walked out of the corner holding a shotgun. It's me, Caliban. Logan held the medicine, pushed the shotgun in Caliban's hand away from him, and strode into the house. Caliban breathed a deep sigh of relief, looked outside the door to make sure there was no one, then put away his shotgun and said, "Send a message in advance next time you come back." Logan shrugged. "Don't be nervous all day long, no one is trying to kill you." Caliban suffers from albinism and has pale skin lesions. He cannot be exposed to strong light and has to wrap himself into a mummy even if he wants to go out. Being in a cold environment all year round made this guy suffer from persecutory paranoia. "Don't tell me this, go see the professor first." Caliban returned to the stove and continued to slowly cook today's lunch. Logan poured the pills he just bought into the bowl and asked, "How is he doing?" "It's always the same, nagging all day long." Caliban shrugged helplessly. In his opinion, the professor is now a crazy old man, a time bomb that can explode at any time. Well, Logan sighed helplessly, took a glass of water, and walked out the door with the pills. It was noon at this time, and the noon sun in the desert was simply frighteningly poisonous. The baked yellow sand seemed to have layers of space fluctuations. Logan braved the scorching sun and came to a huge water tower. The round water tower used to hold the daily water for hundreds of people, but now it is in ruins. Under the scouring of wind and sand and the scorching sun, the surface of the huge water tower is already covered with rust, and many iron sheets cannot resist the erosion of nature, revealing large and small holes. Logan looked at the water tower and sighed as he opened the heavy door of the water tower. The inside of the water tower was transformed into a room, with a desk, a bed, and even a clothesline for hanging clothes. An old man sat in an electric wheelchair, controlling the wheelchair to circle in the huge water tower, and muttering to himself. Logan closed the door of the water tower and called the old man softly, "Charles." "Who?" A hoarse voice came from the wheelchair, accompanied by a pair of hazy eyes hiding under the shadows. "Don't worry, it's me, Logan." Logan walked slowly into the water tower and spoke carefully. Charles Siver moved his wheelchair forward, and light penetrated through the damaged hole on the top of the water tower, illuminating the face full of vicissitudes of life and covered with age spots. He raised his head and glanced at Logan with hazy eyes, and then moved his wheelchair back in fear. "No, you are not Logan. The Logan I know is not like this." Logan quickly stepped forward, came to the front of the wheelchair, bent down, and whispered comfortingly, "Don't worry, Professor, take a good look, it is indeed me." The flustered Charles stared at Logan's face, his spirit gradually calmed down, his light blue eyes revealed disbelief. "Oh my God, Logan, you are so old. You look like an old man." He stretched out his hand tremblingly, and placed his palm like a dead tree against Logan's wrinkled face, his face full of distress. "Professor, I am almost 200 years old," Logan said nonchalantly, handed over the medicine in the bowl, took a bottle of water from the table next to him, and unscrewed the bottle cap. "The professor suffers from Alzheimer's disease and has very poor memory. He often remembers the wrong time and cannot even recognize people clearly. Even if Magneto was standing in front of him when he was sick, he probably wouldn't remember the old man who fell in love and killed each other. Now, he is no longer respected by everyone as professor. In order to avoid pursuit and to prevent accidental loss of control leading to disaster, he could only be locked in such a small water tower, breathing the air full of rust. That's impossible. You have a self-healing factor. You should be in your prime now." The professor's face suddenly darkened. "It must be a conspiracy. They are poisoning you and trying to kill you in their limited lifespan." Logan looked helplessly at the suddenly irritable professor, handed over the bowl of medicine again, and patiently comforted him, "Take the medicine first." The professor looked at the pills in the bowl, his face full of resistance, but when he looked up at Logan's unquestionable eyes, he seemed like a child who was afraid of his parents. He stretched out his trembling palms uncontrollably and threw the pills into his mouth, swallow with water. As the drug took effect and his consciousness gradually awakened, the professor's light blue eyes regained some brightness. He looked up at Logan and asked subconsciously, "Logan, when did you come back?" After saying that, the professor completely came back to his senses, slumped in his chair and sighed, feeling a little lonely, and said, "Sorry, I was confused again." "It doesn't matter." Logan nodded and put the bowl on the table aside. "Do you want to lie down?" The old man nodded. "I'm a little tired." Logan picked up the professor, put him gently on the bed, and covered him with a blanket. "I met a big and generous customer today. He invited me to do a big business and I can make a lot of money." "Sounds dangerous." The professor was lying on the bed, holding the blanket with both hands, and looked at Logan quietly. "Your body is not as good as when you were young." "It's okay. Don't worry, I'll be careful." Logan patted the professor on the shoulder to comfort him. The two of them talked to each other, sitting on the bedside, like family members, like father and son. However, Logan is actually 100 years older than Charles in bed. "Are you still going to go ahead and buy a boat?" Charles suddenly asked, and before Logan could answer, he immediately said, "Are you going to take me on the boat with you and live like this for the rest of your life? Are you willing? That's where we belong." Logan shook his head slowly. "We are all old, and the number of mutants has become much smaller. We are also being pursued by the government. At sea, both you and me, and other ordinary people, will be safer. But that's not the life you pursue. After Charles sighed, he turned his head and no longer looked directly at Logan. He has always been aware of Logan's thoughts. This guy is not a person who is willing to be mediocre. The sea is not Logan's true destination, which is contrary to his original thoughts. He didn't want to see Logan end his life wandering at sea. He could have had a more glorious chapter, but now Logan had to give up these glories. Logan was silent for a long time, and suddenly said softly, "I plan to find a mutant shelter recently." Charles was obviously stunned for a moment, and quickly turned his head to look at Logan, making sure that Logan was not just trying to make himself happy. The frail old man suddenly smiled and said with great relief, "This is Logan. Difficulties will never convince him." He knew how to find a mutant sanctuary and find his own tribe, which meant that Logan was already planning to regroup. This is the real Logan, not a drunken Uber driver. The professor stared into Logan's eyes, with determination hidden under his old eyes. "Do what you want to do, you will be a good leader, and our tribe needs a leader like you." Logan nodded silently. Before yesterday, he really wanted to find a ship and take the professor on the sea. He even found the seller of the ship. Even the ship's quantifier name was the Zeusen, chosen by the former Uncle Wolf boat. But, just as the professor said, he was indeed unwilling. As a time traveler, how can I be willing to do so? But now he is too old, his self-healing factor is suppressed by genetically modified substances, and the adamantium alloy is poisoning his body every moment. Even if he is unwilling to grow old, this body can no longer tolerate his tossing. However, with the awakening of new abilities, his silent heart beat again yesterday. New abilities, new hopes, perhaps, everything is not over yet. Logan slowly raised his head and looked outside through the hole in the water tower. It is already evening, and the sun setting into the horizon illuminates the sunset glow of the desert red. Charles yawned long, and sleepiness was written on his face. He was prone to sleepiness after he got sick, just like many elderly people who need to sleep for a long time, but the quality of sleep is very shallow, and some slight noises can wake them up. "Go to sleep." Logan gently patted his shoulder and soothed him to sleep. After Charles closed his light blue eyes and his breathing gradually stabilized, Logan slowly stood up. "Logan." Charles suddenly woke up and grabbed Logan's wrist, like a child who was afraid of sleeping. "I'm outside." Logan gently patted the back of Charles's hand. "Don't worry, nothing will happen." "Yeah." Charles then carefully withdrew his hand and continued to close his eyes. After making sure Charles was asleep, Logan sighed softly and walked out of the water tower carefully. After Logan left, Charles, who should have been asleep, suddenly opened his eyes. His light blue eyes were shining, staring at the entrance of the water tower, and talking to himself meaningfully. "Logan, Logan Howlett." Logan sat outside the water tower, took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it, looking at the sunset on the horizon. Finally, he took out his mobile phone and the business card and dialed the number on the business card. "It's me, James." When the call was connected, Logan spoke first. Chris Lawrence on the other end of the phone was obviously taken aback, and then his tone became cheerful again. "Dude, I knew you would definitely call. How about it? Have you considered it? Working with me will definitely have a better future than being an Uber driver. I need a decent paycheck." Logan didn't greet him too much. "As long as it's not too outrageous, I can accept it. I think you also know the strength of our Lawrence family. Money is only a small issue." Chris is obviously very satisfied with Rogan's strength, and he likes Rogan's style of doing things. "What do you need me to do?" Logan took a puff of cigarette and spoke indifferently. "It's hard to talk on the phone. Are you free tomorrow? How about we meet at the construction company at 11 o'clock in the morning?" "Okay." Logan hung up the phone and stuck the cigarette butt into the soil. In the past, he didn't like to have too much contact with these wealthy families, but now he has to deal with them. In this world, it's hard to move without money. Even if he is Wolverine, he can't make gold out of thin air. Whether it was the original plan to sell the boat and go into seclusion, or to leave San Antonio to find a shelter where mutants gathered, a lot of money would be needed. With his current job as an Uber driver, he was unable to collect that much money. If he wanted money, he could only choose to cooperate with Chris. Although such cooperation may greatly increase his risk of being discovered, he has no choice. Moreover, after working as an Uber driver for so many years, receiving countless passengers, and wandering around San Antonio for so long without being recognized, perhaps the world has long forgotten about him. Being discovered by someone should only be a small probability event. Logan stood up, dusted himself off, and went back to his room to rest, waiting for his first meeting with the Lawrence family tomorrow. Santa Fe City can only be regarded as a regular city, but it has hundreds of years of history. Due to its geographical location, it is a desert all year round and is mainly based on agriculture. Before the Civil War, slavery was prevalent here. Santa Fe City. Many wealthy businessmen today got their start from the dividends of slavery. The same is true for the Lawrence family. They were former farmers and occupied a lot of the means of production in Santa Fe City. Together with several big families, they made a lot of money in Santa Fe City. Rise. Later, due to the defeat of the Civil War, the policy changed. Coupled with the development of the Industrial Revolution, the changes of the times accelerated. In just a few decades, this land underwent earth-shaking changes. Railroads and roads connected the entire United States. Together, nearby towns gradually merged, and the current city of Santa Fe was established on the wasteland. After the abolition of slavery, several major families turned to other businesses and relied on investing in emerging industries to continue the family to this day. The same is true for the Lawrence family. They seized on the loopholes in the U.S. prohibition law and made a fortune by running a bootlegging business, and even became the largest family in Santa Fe. Speaking of which, perhaps due to genetic reasons, the Lawrence family also made Logan feel somewhat familiar. After all, he was also a farmer before. Before the family changes, he was the heir to the farm. After the reform of the prohibition law, the bootlegging business suffered a major blow. Fortunately, the ancestors of the Lawrence family made wise choices and successfully transformed into coal mining by relying on the huge wealth earned from running bootleg liquor. Today, most of the coal mining business in Santa Fe City is owned by the Lawrence family. Coupled with the logistics industry they have developed in recent years, the Lawrence family has absolute say that no one can shake. James, I'm happy for your arrival. You made the right decision. Chris smiled and led Logan into a solemn office. The luxuriously decorated office is like a palace. There was already a middle-aged man in a black suit waiting on the leather seat behind the floor-to-ceiling window. Let me introduce to you, this is my father, Mr. Lawrence. Chris introduced Logan with a smile. Sitting on the leather sofa with a Monty cigar in his hand, the whole room was filled with a strong smell of cigars. When Mr. Lawrence saw Logan, he was obviously stunned for a moment, and then a smile appeared on his face. Hello, Mr. Lawrence. Logan greeted him politely. It seems my son is right, Mr. James, you look like a ferocious tiger. Lawrence stared at Logan, smiled and pointed to the table and chair in front of him. Please sit down. What do you need me to do? Logan sat on the sofa and asked straight to the point. Lawrence put his cigar on the ashtray and stared at Logan. Mr. James, can I trust you? Sure, Logan nodded in response, and I believe you have already investigated me, otherwise I would not be allowed to set foot here. He knew that these wealthy businessmen were very cautious and would not let anyone enter their lair without investigation. Fortunately, Logan also believed in his ability to disguise. No one in the entire Santa Fe City knew his true identity except the professor and Caliban. So far, he has not been recognized. Clever. Lawrence smiled. We have a batch of goods that will leave in 3 days. It may take about 10 days to deliver. The goods are valuable and special. There are many people who covet them. Our current security team lacks an outstanding leader. I wonder if Mr. James has so much time. Remuneration. Logan spoke calmly. Compared with danger, he cares more about money now. Lawrence raised 2 fingers. $20,000 I believe this is a reasonable offer. Logan lowered his head and thought for a while. Earning $20,000 in 10 days, this does sound like a very tempting price, comparable to his 3-month salary as an Uber driver. But behind this high offer, the risk factor is probably not small. After thinking for a while, Logan nodded. Deal. This high offer makes Logan willing to take such a risk. He only needs one more order to earn enough money to leave. A wise choice. Lawrence squinted his eyes and smiled, picked up the cigar again and took a puff. Come here in 3 days, I will give you detailed arrangements. Logan nodded, said nothing more, stood up, closed the door and left. As the door closed, Lawrence, who was originally calm, suddenly fell. He stared at Chris and asked in a deep voice, "Where did you find him?" "You mean James." Chris looked at his father, who suddenly changed color, and seemed to have noticed something wrong. He said quickly, "I ran into him on the road by accident. He saved my life. He is a very crazy guy, but he is also a good thug, better than anyone in our security team." Chris paused and added, "I have investigated his file. He came to Santa Fe a few years ago and has always been an Uber driver. Except for alcoholism and drunk driving, he has no problems." "No." Lawrence shook his head and kept searching in the cabinet. Finally, he found a stack of old newspapers at the bottom. "He is Wolverine, Logan." Lawrence slapped the bun on the table and pointed to a photo on it. That was a headline news article 20 years ago. The reporter interviewed Xavier School for the Gifted. The most eye-catching position in the photo was Wolverine when he was young. And Wolverine's face just matched James, who just came in. Hiss. Chris looked down at the photo and frowned. It's really him. Although he is much older now than he was more than 20 years ago, I can be sure that they are the same person. The disgusting smell on him is as bad as other mutants. They are all a bunch of cheap things. Lawrence's eyes were cold and he extinguished the cigar in his hand fiercely. "Let the servants clean the office again later." Chris nodded, but still didn't understand. Doesn't this guy know that he is a wanted criminal? He dares to work as an Uber driver. Isn't he worried about being recognized? The most dangerous job is usually the safest. Lawrence said. No one can imagine that the former Wolverine would become an Uber driver. "So are you going to replace him now?" Chris asked. The government's attitude towards mutants is very clear now. It is not a wise choice to cooperate with a mutant at this juncture. Once he is discovered by the government, it will probably have a significant impact on the entire Lawrence family. No, we need such guys. Although they are all inferior people, they are indeed a group of fearless guys in fighting. Lawrence shook his head, stared at the office door, and sneered. Since this guy is taking risks, he must have some concerns, especially since he is still a wanted criminal wanted by the government. As long as we catch his handle, he will let us do whatever we want. Logistics is one of the main businesses of the Lawrence family. With a large amount of capital investment, they quickly occupied the largest logistics market in the entire Santa Fe City. The largest logistics warehouse in the west of Santa Fe City is an industry owned by Lawrence Group. Countless containers sail here every day and are then transferred to various ports in the world. The profit in a single day is enough to make ordinary people live a luxurious lifetime. Outside the busy warehouse, 2 trucks full of goods were parked, and 3 guys who didn't look like they were easy to mess with were waiting quietly beside the trucks. "This cargo is very important. Please pay attention to it and make sure nothing happens." Conrad held a cigarette in his hand and turned around to warn his 2 companions. "If something goes wrong, the 3 of us tied together won't be able to compensate." Samuel, the driver, and Joshua, the security guard, nodded silently. After many years of cooperation, they had already adapted to Conrad's instructions to them. Who told this guy to be a mercenary before? He has successfully completed many dangerous missions in the tropical rainforest and Gobi Desert. In terms of combat ability, this guy can subdue them with one hand. "Aren't you leaving yet?" Joshua, who was tall and thin and wearing a light body armor, asked. "We have waited here long enough." "Wait a minute," Chris asked us to wait for him to come over before setting off. Conrad threw down the cigarette butt and stamped it out. "Okay, they're here." After saying that, he straightened his clothes and strode towards Chris, who was walking from outside. But then he noticed an old man with a beard next to Chris. "Are there any other arrangements, Mr. Chris?" "We are all ready." Conrad smiled and spoke to Chris. Chris did not respond directly, but turned to introduce to Logan beside him. "This is Conrad. He used to be a mercenary and has very strong fighting ability." As he spoke, he turned to look at the driver on the other side. "His name is Samuel. He has excellent driving skills. Even when driving on the most rugged mountain roads, he can make you sleep extraordinarily peacefully in the car." There is also Joshua. He is proficient in assembling various firearms and his driving skills are surprisingly good. He is the driver of the second car. Logan was still wearing the cheap suit. He looked at the three people in front of him and nodded lightly, "Hello." Chris smiled, then pointed at Logan and introduced, "This is Mr. James. He will complete the mission with you. I hope you can have a happy cooperation. By the way, you must obey James for any problems on the road. Arrange." Conrad glanced at Logan in surprise. He looks at least 60 years old. "Mr. Chris, are you sure you're not kidding?" "Of course not." Chris looked at Conrad, his tone unquestionable. "I believe in my vision. Mr. James will be a good leader. If you want to get money, you'd better do as I say." In the face of money, Conrad finally chose to remain silent. He just looked at Logan up and down, his brows furrowed, and he was obviously a little embarrassed to ask him to obey the old man's order. "Okay, let's go. I hope you have a smooth journey." Chris smiled and pointed to the van. Logan said nothing and strode towards the co-pilot of the first truck. The other people said nothing more and turned around to get in the car. But before Josh turned around, Chris pulled him out alone and whispered in a low voice, "Keep an eye on James on the road. That guy is not trustworthy. If there is any change, I don't mind if you bring his body back, but you must be careful. If you do it, make sure you hit it with a fatal blow. He is a dangerous guy." Joshua glanced sideways at Chris's fierce eyes, then turned to look at Logan who was already in the car, nodded silently, and turned around to get in the car. The two cars left the warehouse and drove on the highway in the desert. Logan looked out the window at the endless desert and remained silent. This time the destination is Las Vegas, Nevada, which is very far away from Texas. At the same time, this is also the first time Logan has left San Antonio in Texas. After staying in San Antonio for so long, he almost forgot what the outside world was like. He thought he would remain a hermit in San Antonio until he earned enough money to take his professor to the sea to retire. Unexpectedly, now I have to leave this dry desert early for $20,000. Looking at the scenery outside the window, Logan looked complicated, filled with emotions in his heart, and let out a long breath. "Do you want to smoke?" Samuel suddenly handed over a cigarette. He already had one in his mouth, and the smoke he exhaled was instantly dispersed by the wind outside the car. "Thank you." Logan took the cigarette, lit it with the cigarette lighter and took a deep breath. The white smoke blew away in the wind. "Is this your first time participating in an escort mission?" Samuel asked as he drove the car. Logan just nodded. Haha, if you steal Conrad's position as team leader, that guy will definitely feel uncomfortable. Be careful, he is not easy to mess with." Samuel was holding a cigarette in his mouth, holding the steering wheel, and spoke casually. Logan looked at Samuel in surprise. Logan was a little surprised by the other party's words. He didn't expect that he would say this to him. "I just do it for the money, nothing else." Logan responded indifferently. He would leave as long as he made money. As for the team leader, he didn't care. Who among us is not interested in money? Samuel smiled and shook his head, but people like us can only earn some hard-earned money at most. If we want to earn more US dollars, we can only enter the Lawrence family. Once we set foot there, we can truly get rid of the bottom and enter the upper class. Conrad wants to enter the Lawrence family. Logan glanced at the rearview mirror and looked at the truck behind him. He suddenly understood why Conrad cared so much about the position of team leader. Samuel nodded. Of course, that guy is very ambitious, and the team can complete the task well. Chris and others will naturally credit the credit to the team leader, so Conrad usually takes the position of team leader very seriously. In short, you should be careful. For the position of team leader, he may try his best to find fault with you, and may even deliberately make some noise to delay or fail the task, showing that he is the only choice for the team leader, so that Chris and others will pay more attention to him. Samuel may not want to let anything go wrong during the task, or he may be kind and let Logan be careful of Conrad. "Thank you for your reminder." Logan nodded indifferently. He didn't care about Conrad's potential threat. Samuel smiled. "Don't thank me. If there is a problem with the mission, my bonus will be reduced. I hope this trip will be safe." While chatting, the vehicle arrived at the checkpoint on the Texas border. As a federal country, each state even has its own unique laws. If you want to travel across states, you need official certificates. This is also the reason why Logan rarely goes out after entering Texas. As a wanted criminal by the government, he obviously can't get a certificate from formal channels. But it is obvious that the Lawrence family has already opened up the network of relationships here. The truck with the Lawrence family logo does not even need to stop at the checkpoint. It drives out of the checkpoint unimpeded and successfully crosses the Texas border. As Chris said, this is a very long journey. Nevada is very far away from San Antonio. It was only halfway through the journey until the sun went down. However, after leaving San Antonio, the original desert gradually faded, and lush green plants began to appear on both sides of the road. The route they chose was a forest road. At the end of the road was a small town. The convoy needed to cross the town before entering the new highway. Let's take turns tonight. I don't want to waste time on the road. Logan glanced at the gradually darkening sky and turned to look at Samuel. The longer you delay on the road, the more things may happen. Logan doesn't want to see any accidents happen. Okay. Samuel obviously didn't care about running all night, picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "I'll tell them." However, as soon as the voice fell, Samuel's face suddenly froze when he looked at the rearview mirror. Wait, what are they doing? Logan hurriedly looked at the rearview mirror, only to see that the truck that had been following behind suddenly turned and stopped outside a tavern. "Stop and take a look," Logan ordered. Samuel hurriedly stopped the vehicle. At this time, Conrad and Josh in the car behind had also gotten out of the car and were about to enter the bar. Logan stepped forward to stop them. "What are you doing? Did I say we were going to stop?" Conrad glanced at Logan and said disdainfully, "Old man, I don't care what you think, but I need to rest now. If you want to leave, go by yourself. We need to drink some wine here and set off tomorrow morning." Logan frowned and said with a sullen face, "I say, get in the car now and drive overnight." Conrad just glanced at Logan, snorted coldly, strode forward without caring, and pushed Logan away with his shoulder and walked into the bar. Conrad walked into the pub without looking back. This guy is always like this. Samuel looked at the door of the pub and shook his head helplessly. "I'll go call him out." It was only the first day of the mission, and Samuel didn't want the team to get too stalemate. Logan turned his head and looked at Josh on the other side. At this time, Josh seemed to be indifferent to what was happening in front of him. He stood there motionless, with his hands on his chest, looking like he had nothing to do with it. Logan thought for a while, and pulled Samuel, who was about to enter the pub. "I'll go." Samuel was stunned, turned back and looked at Logan worriedly. With his personality, he won't listen to you. He knew that the reason why Conrad was so irritable today was because Logan took his position as the leader. Logan went in to call him. Not only could he not call him out, but it might also aggravate the conflict. But Logan ignored him, pushed open the door of the pub, and strode in. The light in the pub was dim, and many people gathered together drinking beer and chatting in a low voice. Conrad sat alone at the bar. He seemed to be very familiar with the receptionist of the tavern. He had already finished half of the drink in his hand and was whispering something with the receptionist. Logan walked to Conrad and sat down, raised a finger and said to the receptionist, "Hey, a glass of wine." Conrad glanced at Logan, but did not speak. He just turned around slightly and continued to drink. The receptionist also handed a large glass of beer to Logan. Logan glanced at Conrad and raised the glass. "Follow me after you finish this glass. This place is too messy. We must ensure the safety of the goods." He knew that Conrad wanted to enter the Lawrence family, but Logan was not interested in these. He just wanted to complete the task quickly and get the salary. After that, Logan raised the glass and drank the full glass of beer. "Old man, what are you worried about? I have been running this route for 3 years, and there has never been any accident with the goods I escorted." Conrad looked at Logan with a cold snort. He really didn't know what was wrong with Chris's brain to let a 60-year-old coward be their leader. If something really happened, this guy might be scared to death by the gunshot. Logan didn't want to respond too much to Conrad's contemptuous attitude. Years of life on the run have taught him how to avoid unnecessary trouble. "I just want to complete the mission early, take the money and leave." Logan pointed out that he would not stay in this so-called leader position for too long, and he would leave after the mission was completed, hoping to let Conrad let go of his grudge against him. However, Logan's tolerance made Conrad even more disdainful. Conrad took another gulp of wine and snorted coldly. If you want money, then follow my rules and sleep well here for a night. Logan stared at him coldly, his expression gradually becoming cold. Blindly tolerating him seemed unable to change this arrogant guy, so when necessary, he could only use force appropriately. I'll give you 3 seconds to make a choice. Logan started counting directly. 1. Conrad was not afraid of Logan's dangerous eyes, but showed a face of teasing, and counted for Logan provocatively. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bang! Before Conrad finished counting, a fist as hard as steel hit him in an instant. The severe pain on his face turned Conrad's countdown into a scream, and his body fell back and fell heavily to the ground, and the wine glass in his hand fell to the ground and shattered. I am the leader of this mission. Put your bad temper back and listen to my arrangements. This is just a warning, and I don't want it to happen next time. Logan stared coldly at Conrad on the ground and put away his waving fist. Old man, you dare to sneak attack me. Conrad stood up with an angry face. The sudden heavy blow made his vision a little blurred. He felt a dampness under his lips. He reached out and touched his palm, which was covered with scarlet nosebleed. He stared at Logan, and his sturdy figure made him look like an angry brown bear. He didn't think that Logan was so strong when he was knocked down by Logan's sneak attack. He just thought that he was careless. If it was a head-on battle, this old man would definitely not be his opponent. He clenched his fists and raised his hands to swing at Logan. The bulging muscles on his arms showed that he had used up all his strength in this punch. If he was a normal 60-year-old man, it would be basically impossible to survive this punch. Conrad was obviously extremely angry about Logan's sneak attack. Under the influence of alcohol, his eyes were full of rage and hostility. Whisper. Logan didn't give the mercenary any face at all. He stretched out his palm and grabbed Conrad's arm like an iron clamp. With a gorgeous shoulder throw, he directly smashed this guy who looked as strong as a brown bear onto the wine table next to him. Bang! The wine table was instantly broken, and the broken wood pieces scattered all over the floor. In an instant, the tavern was completely quiet. Everyone looked over and was stunned to see that Logan, who looked to be 60 years old, could actually give Conrad a shoulder throw. The bartender at the front desk was also stunned for a moment. His face suddenly darkened, and he shouted loudly, "Fight outside, no fighting is allowed in the tavern." At the same time, several young men with short sticks ran out from the backstage and surrounded Logan in the middle. "Don't worry, I will compensate for the losses here. This is just our private matter." Surrounded by so many people, Logan's mood did not fluctuate at all. He used the rag in front of the bar to wipe off the blood on his fists. Ahem. Conrad also stood up from the ground and stared at Logan angrily. Such an attack actually did no real harm to the former mercenary, but being so humiliated by an old man made the anger in his heart burn to the extreme. "I don't need you here, I can handle it myself." Conrad spoke to the circle of young people. After finishing speaking, he looked at Logan fiercely. "Okay, old man, since you don't want to live, then I won't be polite. If you have the ability, we'll see you outside." After speaking, Conrad wiped the blood on his face, turned around and strode out of the tavern. Logan didn't want to get into trouble with the tavern, so he took out $100 from his pocket and threw it on the bar, treating it as the price of the drink and the money to pay for the table, and then strode out of the tavern. In order to make Conrad obedient in subsequent tasks, it seems that a lesson is indispensable. Fortunately, although his body is far inferior to that of his youth, it is still more than enough to deal with a mercenary. As soon as he walked out of the tavern, Conrad picked up a steel pipe from the ground, turned around and swung it at Logan's head without hesitation. There was no wave on Logan's face. He stretched out his hand and grasped the steel pipe firmly in his hand. Then he pulled hard and the steel pipe was snatched away from him. Conrad was stunned for a moment, and surprise suddenly appeared on his face. He was very confident in his own strength. With this stick, steel could be bent directly. But Logan was able to block it directly with one hand, and even snatched his own steel pipe away. How is it possible? How could this old man be so strong? Conrad's eyes widened and he stared at Logan. He couldn't believe that an old man over 50 years old had such strength. "What are you doing?" There was a sudden explosion, and Samuel and Jashir strode towards this side. When they saw the two men at war with each other, they also saw the blood stains on Conrad's face. They realized that something was wrong, and hurriedly stepped forward to kill him. The two pulled apart. What happened? How come the fight started in just a few minutes? Samuel took the steel pipe from Logan's hand and threw it aside. His face was full of worry and a little surprised at the same time. He could see that Conrad seemed to be at a disadvantage in this conflict. Logan did not respond to Samuel, but just stared at Conrad coldly. I am the leader of this mission. If you still act without permission, I don't mind maiming you before you go on the road. At this time, Conrad was obviously still surprised by Logan's power, but he still refused to admit defeat and snorted coldly, "Old man, if you have the guts, just give it a try." Samuel and Chow Shire only felt overwhelmed and stopped them tightly, fearing that the conflict would escalate. "Stop talking." Samuel tried to dissuade him. Such a thing happened on the first day of the mission. He really couldn't imagine what kind of friction there would be in the following days. Bang! Just as the two were trying to dissuade Logan and Samuel respectively, a harsh collision sound suddenly sounded. Several people were startled and quickly turned their heads to look. I saw a small dent in the rear of a truck parked on the side of the road. The culprit was a black car that crashed into it. Samuel and Josh looked at the smashed rear of the truck, and ignored Logan and Conrad, and quickly ran towards the truck. The task this time is not to mediate disputes, the goods on the truck are the top priority. Logan and Conrad looked at each other, put aside their disputes temporarily, and stepped forward together. "Why are you driving so big a truck that you can't see it?" Logan asked loudly at the two people who got out of the car. Sorry. These were two black men, both very muscular. After getting off the car, they kept apologizing to Logan and the others. Their words had a very strong accent and they sounded like Mexicans. "Don't worry, we'll pay for the repairs. It was just an accident." One of them, Old Mo, reached into his pocket as if to take out money. His face was very sincere. "Of course." Samuel stared at the rear of the truck and said angrily, "The bumper has been smashed, and the repair costs are quite high." "Well, don't worry, money is just a small problem." The two Old Mos looked at each other and smiled. The next moment, the Old Mo who seemed to be paying the money suddenly pulled his hand out of his pocket. What was in his hand was a shiny black pistol instead of a banknote. Bang! Old Mo raised his gun and fired without hesitation. The expressions of several people suddenly changed. Samuel looked at the fire from the muzzle of the gun, and his brain suddenly shut down, unable to make any reaction at all. On the other side, Logan felt his scalp numb. His keen intuition made him react almost subconsciously. He jumped up suddenly and instantly knocked down the three people around him. In the flash of lightning, the high-speed rotating bullets carried blazing fireworks, almost grazing against Logan's back. The cheap suit he was wearing was torn out in an instant. A clear blood mark was left on the solid back. Chapter 11. The piercing gunshots echoed in the dark night, bullets whizzed past, and hot steam filled the air. Logan and the three fell to the ground and dodged the bullets. Although the two old Mexicans were surprised at Logan's reaction speed, they obviously would not give up. They quickly turned the muzzle of the gun, aimed at the four people who fell to the ground, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Looking at the fireworks bursting out of the black muzzle, Logan's expression suddenly changed. The four of them fell to the ground at this time, and they could not make any evasive movements at all. In a hurry, Logan caught a glimpse of a trash can next to him, and immediately pulled it over to block him. Bang bang bang. All the bullets hit the trash can, making a piercing sound. Fortunately, the other party used a small caliber pistol, which could not penetrate the trash can full of garbage at all, which also gave the four people a chance to breathe. "Conrad, you said it was safe here." Samuel tried his best to curl up behind the trash can, and cursed Conrad in the fierce gunfire. "These fools who can only sneak attack." Conrad was already angry, and now he was attacked again. The endless anger in his chest needed to be vented. He reached out from his waist and took out the pistol, quickly loaded it, raised it above his head and shot blindly in the direction of the old Mexican. As Conrad angrily fired all the bullets in the pistol, there was gradually no movement outside. Logan shrank his body and looked down at a piece of glass that fell out of the trash can. The glass reflected two old Mexicans running quickly towards the truck. Seeing this scene, Logan was shocked and quickly got up from the ground. Their target is that batch of goods. This is not an ordinary highway robbery, but a premeditated interception of goods. Logan is not willing to give up the $20,000. Seeing that the two men were about to open the door of the truck, he didn't think much, took out his pistol and pulled the trigger decisively at the two men. Bang bang. After two crisp gunshots, the two men fell to the ground, their heads were all pierced by bullets. The speed was so fast that they took their lives in almost one breath. Looking at the two old Mexicans who fell, the three people who poked their heads out from behind the trash can were shocked. "You have good shooting skills." Samuel looked at the fallen body, which was at least half 100 meters away from here. For a weapon with a short range like a pistol, being able to accurately shoot a headshot at such a long distance is enough to be called a sharpshooter. Even Josh, who had always been calm, was a little touched. Logan ignored the shock of several people, put away the pistol, and said sternly, "Hurry up and get in the car, we have to leave here, there may be more than two of them." The target of these two people was obviously heading for the truck. Logan didn't believe that two small fish dared to openly rob the goods of the Hollands family. Maybe there might be some organization behind them. In short, staying here for one more minute might add a little more danger. Logan's words were agreed by everyone, and even Conrad stopped refuting. Several people got in the car quickly and left the town quickly. But not far from the town, several dazzling headlights suddenly flashed behind them. Logan, who was driving the truck, looked in the rearview mirror and saw three pickup trucks coming quickly towards the truck. There were really pursuers. Samuel, who was in the co-pilot, looked at the pickup truck in the rearview mirror, and his face suddenly darkened. Logan was not surprised by this. He stepped on the accelerator with a stern look, and the engine of the truck made an extreme roar. Samuel took out his pistol and loaded it, ready to fight at any time. He stared at the rearview mirror and said viciously, "These lunatics, can't they see the logo of the Lawrence Group? In this area, even children know that offending the Lawrence Group is not a wise choice." Logan stared at the road ahead and responded in a deep voice, "They are robbing the Lawrence Group. This is definitely a premeditated robbery." Now it seems that this batch of goods is indeed some tempting things, and even makes many people want to offend the Lawrence family. But at this time, Logan has no time to care about what these are. His mind is thinking hard about how to get rid of these pursuers. But even if they have pulled the gear of the truck to the maximum and stepped on the accelerator completely, the speed of the truck full of goods is really not as fast as the pickup truck behind them. The three pickup trucks are like beasts that have locked their prey, biting them tightly behind them. Even the trucks driven by Conrad and Josh behind them have been caught up by two pickup trucks. Two pickup trucks put the truck in the middle, turned the steering wheel, and kept hitting the truck in the middle. Bang bang. Under the impact of the pickup trucks, the truck kept twisting on the road, and the body swayed continuously, as if it would roll over at any time. Conrad, sitting in the passenger seat, was furious, raised his pistol and shot at a pickup truck without hesitation. Josh also drove the truck while taking out a pistol and shooting at the pickup truck on the other side. Under the deterrence of bullets, the two pickup trucks finally got scared and slowed down. But it was only a short while before they rushed up again, and the people on the pickup trucks also took out their pistols and kept firing back at the trucks. After a while, there were several bullet holes in the truck body. The two sides shot at each other crazily on the wide road. "We are not as fast as them, sooner or later we will be intercepted by them." Samuel stared at the rearview mirror, paying attention to the battle situation behind him, his expression full of nervousness. Logan frowned, and for a while he had no good solution. At this time, an intersection suddenly appeared ahead. Logan quickly picked up the walkie-talkie and said to the two people in the car behind, "There is an intersection 50 meters ahead. Turn left together. If I remember correctly, there is an abandoned lumberyard nearby." Before setting off, Logan looked at the mission map and clearly wrote down some important coordinates along the way. After saying that, he turned the steering wheel sharply and turned quickly. Joshua behind him also seized the opportunity, turned his direction, and quickly caught up with Logan's car. The sudden change of direction gave the three pickup trucks no time to react, and they drove straight ahead for nearly 20 meters before quickly changing direction and pursuing again. This episode gave Logan and the others a chance to breathe. "Get rid of them," Samuel looked at the calm road behind him and let out a long sigh of relief. However, Logan remained calm and shook his head. They will not give up. We must deal with these bugs. Samuel nodded noncommittally. Their truck is too heavy and cannot compete with the speed of the pickup truck. Sooner or later, they will be overtaken. After driving for a while, Logan finally saw the abandoned wood factory marked on the map. Many tree stumps that had not been removed were piled together, and there was a dilapidated-looking wooden barn in the middle. Hide the car in the lumberyard. Logan took the lead in driving the car into the abandoned wooden warehouse, turned off the lights, and quickly got out of the car with a pistol and spare magazines. Joshua also parked next to them. 4 people gathered around. What now? Samuel looked outside the wooden warehouse. At this time, the pursuers' car lights were clearly visible, and it only took 3 minutes to catch up. You go out, close the barn door, and hide in the nearby woods. I'll deal with them here. When the gunfire rings, you can take action and finish off all these followers. Logan ordered calmly, while changing the magazine of the pistol and getting ready. Are you alone? When Samuel heard that Logan wanted to deal with them alone, he couldn't help but feel worried for a moment. There are a lot of people on the other side. Each of the 3 pickup trucks was full of people, at least a dozen people. Don't worry, I'm sure. After Logan finished speaking, he quickly climbed up to the upper level of the wooden warehouse and took cover. Before going up, he glanced at Conrad. This guy has been silent since the attack. He just held the pistol and was extremely quiet. Logan doesn't have time to settle accounts with this guy now. The top priority now is to deal with the pursuers. Samuel and others also knew that now was not the time to hesitate, so they quickly went out, closed the barn door and hid. Logan was hiding alone in the dark and dusty wooden barn. The moonlight passed through the small coffin and barely outlined the outline of the wooden warehouse. This seemed to be a wooden warehouse that had been abandoned for a long time. Many things had been emptied. The wooden warehouse was gradually decaying in the years of wind and rain, and there was a rotten smell in the air. Logan wiped the sweat from his forehead, held his breath, and listened quietly to what was going on outside. After a while, the sound of cars was heard outside the lumberyard. 3 pickup trucks will park in front of the wooden barn, and 16 people will get out. They were wearing black uniforms and were most likely members of nearby gangs. They followed the ruts along the way and got here. However, this group of people did not rush in directly. They all knew that Logan and the others were armed, and if they entered rashly, they might be beaten into pieces instantly. Stop hiding, I know you are inside. A lean man walked out of the team, looked at the closed door of the wooden warehouse, and shouted loudly, his voice echoing in the wilderness. If you don't want to die, just open the door and hand over the goods, otherwise no one will leave here alive. Logan clearly heard the majestic shouting, but did not make any response. He carefully hid in the wooden barn, took off his coat calmly, revealing his solid arms, and all the muscles in his body were tense. Bang! The door of the wooden warehouse was kicked open. The rotten wooden door kept shaking under the violent impact, and all the debris fell off. The bright car lights outside instantly illuminated the dim wooden warehouse. 10 figures held pistols and entered with orderly vigilance. They kept scanning the surroundings. But they didn't notice that on the beam above their heads, a pair of sharp eyes like a cheetah were staring at the prey below that was about to step into the trap. Snap! The door suddenly closed, completely blocking the dazzling car lights outside. The entire wooden warehouse fell into darkness again. The breath of death fills the entire wooden barn. Not all the pursuers entered the warehouse. They left 6 people outside the warehouse and guarded the entire warehouse. In the bushes not far away, Samuel and the other 2 looked at the direction of the warehouse vigilantly. There are still 6 people outside. The others have gone in. James is in danger. Samuel whispered, feeling bad. These guys are obviously gang members. They are not well trained, but most of them have been fighting outside for many years. Their ruthlessness and bloodiness are not comparable to ordinary people. 10 people entered the warehouse to surround Logan alone. Logan was in a very dangerous situation. Isn't he very confident? Conrad touched his nose, which was still aching, and said sarcastically. Although Logan saved their lives in front of the tavern and now he is risking his life alone, Conrad will not change his opinion of Logan. Stop talking nonsense, go. Josher clenched his pistol and was about to go forward to kill the 6 people who were on the lookout. "Wait a minute." Samuel hurriedly grabbed him. James said, "Wait until the gunshot." After a series of events, Samuel inexplicably trusted Logan, an old man who looked to be 60 years old. Since he said that they should wait until the gunshot before they could take action, Samuel felt that he should follow his instructions, and the chances of winning might be better. Bang! At this moment, the door of the wooden warehouse was tightly closed. The next moment, the harsh sound of gunfire and panicked roars instantly rang in the wooden warehouse. The silent jungle was instantly awakened by the sudden sound, and the crows in the forest flapped their wings and fled quickly. The 6 people on the lookout were also startled by the sudden closing of the door and the startled gunshots, and stared at the door with guns raised. "They're doing it." Samuel no longer hesitated, raised his pistol and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! A gunshot knocked one person down instantly. The sudden change shocked the remaining 5 people outside the door. But they reacted quickly and quickly turned over and hid behind the fence. All the bullets fired by Samuel and the other 2 were blocked by the fence. At the same time, the 5 people also raised their pistols above their heads and kept counter-attacking in the direction of Samuel and the other 2. Samuel and Conrad could only hide behind the trees. The situation was deadlocked for a while. The gunshots in the wooden warehouse were more intense, and the harsh sound echoed in the woods. So many people can beat James into a sieve. Samuel looked in the direction of the wooden warehouse, and was extremely worried. But they were now blocked outside by a few people who were watching the wind, and they could not provide any support at all. "That old guy is just committing suicide. If we had kept driving away, we might have had a chance, but he chose such a remote place to ambush." Conrad hid behind the tree and kept shooting back at the guards, complaining, "If the goods are lost because of this old guy's arrogance, none of us will have a good ending. If you hadn't insisted on drinking, we wouldn't have run into these guys." Samuel argued unconvinced. "You." Conrad glared at Samuel fiercely, but stopped talking and continued to pour bullets at the guards. At the same time, a pungent smell of blood was permeating the wooden warehouse. In the dim wooden warehouse, 2 bodies had already fallen in a pool of blood, and the remaining 8 people were back to back, constantly shooting into the darkness. The blind point shooting showed that they didn't know where the opponent was at all. Logan, who appeared and disappeared, made them feel like they were fighting a ghost. Logan was now shuttling through the hail of bullets, bullets constantly passing by him, the hot bullets almost close to his body. But he looked fearless in the dark night. His figure moved like a lightning, like a meteor tearing through the darkness in the night sky, making it impossible for people to detect his traces. The dark pupils that looked like wolf eyes made him see even more clearly in the dark environment than in the daytime. He gave up the pistol, and the wind-powered steel claws stretched between his fists reflected silver light in the moonlight. His figure rolled in the dark and pounced on the face of a gang member. The man only felt a gust of wind passing in front of him, and when he reacted, a face without emotion appeared in front of him, as if the god of death had descended in front of him. The next moment, the sharp steel claws scratched his chest, warm blood splashed out, and his vitality dissipated instantly, and he fell heavily to the ground. The other gang members noticed that another of their companions had fallen, and their faces were filled with fear, but they could not see the enemy's position at all, and could only shoot blindly in the dark. Logan, who had already hidden again, reached out to wipe the blood off his face. The pungent smell of blood made his brain extremely clear, and killing gradually awakened the beast in his heart, and his cold eyes reflected the extreme bloodthirstiness. The next moment, his figure flashed out again. In an instant, a head flew up suddenly, and the separated neck sprayed hot blood like a fountain. The head fell squarely on the shoulder of another gang member. The man turned his head and saw the head of his companion staring at him, and his psychological defense line completely collapsed. "Ghost, this is definitely a ghost." He couldn't stand the fear and yelled, threw the pistol, turned around and ran out the door. But what came to him was a pair of cold eyes that were 100 times more terrifying than the god of death. The next moment, the stinging pain of his heart being cut made him completely desperate. When he was on the verge of death, he realized what kind of terrifying existence his group had provoked. In the darkness, Logan had no intention of stopping, and his figure rolled again, appearing behind another gang member like a ghost. Before the man could react, the sharp steel claws instantly pierced his neck and fell heavily to the ground. Logan was like a fierce wolf with precise attacks, and his figure quickly twisted in the wooden warehouse. Every time he paused, one person would fall in a pool of blood. And this dark environment and the ghost-like Logan completely confused all the gang members. They tried their best to find Logan's position in the dark, but they could not detect his trace anyway, and could only watch their companions fall one after another. Logan's speed was really too fast. At this time, he had completely transformed into a hungry wolf in the forest, turning into a series of afterimages that were impossible to capture in the darkness. The narrow space in the wooden warehouse could not restrict his movements at all. He moved freely in the wooden warehouse, appeared in places that no one expected, and then easily solved the man's life. In just a dozen seconds, the enemy fell to the ground, and the painful wails, the roars of fear, the crisp sounds of guns falling to the ground, and the dull sounds of corpses falling to the ground echoed throughout the wooden warehouse. The last enemy who tried to escape from the wooden warehouse fell, but did not die directly. The fear of dying made him open his eyes wide, and finally saw this terrifying enemy clearly. The blood gushing from his mouth made him unable to say any words of begging. Logan looked at him and wanted to use his steel claws to completely solve him. But then he found that the claws could not be fully extended until the end of the battle, and only a small part of the head was exposed. Helplessly, he had to pick up the pistol on the ground and pointed it at the head of the terrified gang member. Bang! The blood instantly soaked the floor, and the smell of blood echoed throughout the wooden warehouse. Logan let out a long breath, but he did not rest directly. Instead, he immediately ran to the car, opened the door, took out a few bottles of mineral water, and washed the blood off his body. Touching the extra bullet holes on his body, he did not have time to remove the shrapnel, and hurriedly put on his coat and buttoned it up. Then he collapsed on the ground and gasped. Bang! The door was suddenly opened. Samuel, who had dealt with the guards outside, rushed in with Josh and Conrad, holding pistols in his hands, ready to shoot at any time. However, the next moment, the pupils of the three people shrank instantly. The bodies fell to the ground in pieces, and their faces were full of fear, as if they had seen the god of death. The blood on the ground was trying to tell the tragic battle that had taken place here. Logan sat on the ground, looking at their figures, breathing heavily. At this moment, Samuel and the other two felt their scalps tingling, staring at Logan in amazement, unable to believe what was happening before their eyes. 10 gang members armed with guns and live ammunition died at Logan's hands. Even Logan didn't seem to have any injuries. How could this be possible? They looked at Logan in amazement, feeling suffocated. At this moment, they completely realized how terrifying the fighting power of this old man who looked to be in his 60s was. Even the arrogant Conrad was frightened by this scene and his heart stopped. What happened tonight will probably be unforgettable for them in their lives. Logan looked at them, drank the remaining half bottle of mineral water in his hand, and his expression was still calm. Prestige +1. Prestige +1. Prestige +1. Pack up and we'll be on the road in 10 minutes. Although Logan was very tired and needed to rest, he didn't want to spend the night with the bodies all over the ground. Moreover, no one knew whether there would be other pursuers behind them, so staying here was definitely a dangerous decision. Clean up the bloodstains on the car. He stood up and walked between the three people and walked out of the wooden warehouse. Is this guy really 60 years old? Samuel still had a dull look on his face. He really couldn't associate the scene in front of him with a sloppy old man. 10 strong gang members with guns died in the hands of a 60-year-old man in a few minutes. If others told others about it, they would definitely think it was a joke. The file says 69 years old. Josh responded in a low voice. Looking at the faces of these corpses full of fear before they died, although he was surprised, he was not unacceptable in his heart. The person who was named by Chris as the leader for the first time to participate in the delivery mission could definitely not be an ordinary person, and before they left, Chris also told him alone that he was a dangerous guy. Someone who can make the Lawrence family fear must have strength that ordinary people can hardly imagine. On the other side, Conrad looked at the corpses on the ground in silence. He tried to make himself look calm, but the astonishment in his eyes was hard to hide. Even for top mercenaries, it would be difficult to easily deal with 10 enemies with live ammunition in this small space without time to set any traps. But this old man not only did it, but also looked unharmed. He subconsciously looked back at Logan's departing back, his eyes full of fear. Although he was still unhappy with this self-righteous old man, the other party really had the strength to turn himself into a corpse in an instant. Drive the truck out. It will take a lot of time to clean up those blood stains. If we drive into the city like this, we will definitely be stopped by the police. Josh patted the stunned Conrad and took the lead in getting on a truck. Conrad and Samuel stopped talking, moved the corpses blocking the road, and started the truck. At the same time, in a bathroom next to the wood warehouse, Logan tried to turn on the light in the bathroom, but it was obvious that this abandoned lumberyard had no electricity supply. Fortunately, the moonlight was bright tonight, and the broken ceiling of the bathroom could not block the moonlight. In addition, Logan's eyes were clearer in the dark, so even without the light, he could still see clearly. Cough, cough, cough. Logan supported his hands in front of the dusty wash basin. The intense exercise made his physical condition worse, and he couldn't stop coughing violently. He reached out to wipe off the thick layer of dust on the mirror. With the reflection of the moonlight, the mirror reflected his tired face. Logan lowered his head. He couldn't look directly at the face that looked vicissitudes and bloodshot eyes. He took off his coat with difficulty, and several black holes in the gun holes looked particularly eye-catching. Click. Logan gritted his teeth, and his muscles were fully tensed at this moment. Under the squeezing of muscles, shrapnel slowly forced out of the bullet holes. Hiss. The intense pain made Logan take a breath of cold air. This feeling was no less than pulling out the blade inserted in his body. The shrapnel fell on the wash basin, smashing the ceramic wash basin. The piercing pain made Logan gradually numb. The sweat beads on his forehead kept dripping and splashing on the bloody shrapnel. His body couldn't stop shaking, and the palm that supported the wash basin almost crushed the entire wash basin. As the last shrapnel was squeezed out, Logan finally relaxed, holding the wash basin and breathing heavily. His exhausted appearance looked like he had just finished a marathon. In the mirror, the bullet holes all over his body did not heal as quickly as before, and the black muzzle of the gun was so terrifying that people could not look directly at it. The weakness in his body made Logan inexplicably angry, and he punched the mirror hard. He was Wolverine. In the past, he could not retreat no matter the terrifying power of nuclear bombs or the power of the Phoenix that could destroy everything. But now, just a few bullets have made him exhausted. How can he be willing to accept this? By the way, prestige. After venting his inner emotions, Logan remembered his new ability. That might help him change the current situation. Endurance 6, Strength 7, Agility 7, Speed 7, Intelligence 5, Defense 7, Willpower 10, Fighting Skills 7, Prestige 4, Special Attributes none, Special Ability Self-Healing Factor. Current physical condition injured and bleeding, gradually weakening, in poor condition. Free points 1, Enhancement points 3. Logan noticed that compared to before, there are now more free points and enhancement points. Obviously, this was obtained after the battle just now. Logan is clear about the free points. It can increase any of its own indicators at will, such as speed, which can make it faster. If it is maxed out, even the Flash will be ashamed in front of it. If it is increased to strength, and the strength is maxed out, the power that can burst out of the body will make even the Red Tank temporarily avoid the edge. As for this enhancement point, it is obviously used to enhance his own ability. However, Logan was not in a hurry to use it, but re-looked at other options. Self-healing factor can be enhanced. Self-healing factor. This ability is currently in a weakened state and cannot maintain the initial self-healing speed. The reason is aging and the suppression of the X gene. You can enhance this ability to enhance the resistance of the X gene and break the suppression. Logan knew very well that the reason for the sharp decline in the effect of his self-healing factor was due to genetically modified food. This caused his body to no longer be able to slow down the speed of aging. And the gradually aging body made it more difficult for the suppressed self-healing factor to produce obvious effects. Fortunately, the awakening of the new ability gave him hope of restoring the self-healing factor. As long as the self-healing factor is strengthened to a certain extent, the suppression can be broken and the initial effect can be restored. At that time, the self-healing factor can repair his aging body and may even return to youth. 3-point enhancement. Logan no longer hesitated and used all 3 points to enhance the self-healing factor. He knew the importance of the self-healing factor, and other options were far less important than the self-healing factor. No effect. Logan looked down at his body. After strengthening 3 points, Logan did not feel any obvious changes in his body. The black bullet holes were still very conspicuous, and there was no sign of healing. It seems that 3 points can't make the self-healing factor get too obvious. Logan murmured in a low voice, and simply stopped thinking about it. It doesn't work now, but it doesn't mean it won't work in the future. As the prestige increases, the more points you get, one day you will be able to completely restore the self-healing factor. As for the remaining free point, Logan is not in a hurry to use it. Now that he is hiding his identity, there will not be too much danger in the short term. There is no need to enhance other attributes for the time being. Instead of blindly adding them, it is better to keep this point for emergency use. Dong dong dong. The wooden door of the toilet was knocked. James, are you ready? We have dealt with it and it's time to go. Outside the door, Samuel's slightly concerned voice came in. That's good. Logan put on his coat again, hiding all his wounds under his cheap suit, and then opened the door and went out. The convoy set off again and drove to Nevada overnight. Las Vegas, Nevada is undoubtedly a gambler's paradise. Since the legalization of casinos was promulgated here in the last century, countless people have rushed to Nevada one after another, and countless casinos have sprung up. Gamblers are enjoying themselves at the gambling table, either winning a lot or losing nothing. Laughter and despair are happening here every day. And this is the destination of Logan's trip, a place that fills the imagination of countless people. On the highway, Samuel looked at the avenue leading to the casino. The expression on his face became more and more excited. Las Vegas, I'm back. Have you been here before? Logan turned his head and asked in surprise. Samuel didn't really look like a gambler. Of course, Samuel expressed excitement. I am a super lucky star in Las Vegas. Last time I won a total of $30,000 here. After saying that, he glanced at the rearview mirror angrily. Don't tell Joshua this. He is the most unlucky one among the three of us. He lost a total of 20,000 yuan last time and almost even lost his car. For sale. Logan nodded. He had no interest in these things. He knew that the gambling table was exciting, but the one who benefited the most was always the casino, and the goddess of luck would not always favor one person. Hey, James, do you want to play together for a while? I know a casino with excellent service that will definitely keep you excited all night long. Samuel extended the invitation enthusiastically and explained, don't worry, it won't affect the work. It will take a whole night to unload the goods, and no one will disturb us during this period. It was the first time Logan participated in the task of transporting goods. He was not clear about some details and asked, don't you need us to guard it? I heard that Las Vegas is not a peaceful place. Casinos are prevalent here, and people go bankrupt every day, or even owe huge debts. These desperate gamblers often block roads and rob, and take the funds they robbed to the casino to lose it all again. Don't worry, there is a dedicated person in charge of this matter. Samuel was obviously not worried about safety issues. The Lawrence family has also invested in several casinos in Las Vegas. No one here would be stupid enough to take action on the Lawrence family's goods. Besides, our task is only to transport. If something happens later, it's not our responsibility. Only then did Logan realize. Samuel continued to extend the invitation enthusiastically. How about it, do you want to go together? You just need to buy from me, and I guarantee you will have a bumper harvest tonight. Obviously, before arriving at the destination, Samuel was already looking forward to it. Logan smiled and shook his head. You go ahead, I don't like the noisy environment, and this is my first time coming to Las Vegas. I heard it is a very touristy place. I want to be alone. Take a walk. This was his first time out of San Antonio in many years. He wanted to find a tavern to have a drink first, and then wander around to see how the world had changed in the past 10 years. Oh well, Samuel was not disappointed by Logan's rejection. If you come again next time, you must give it a try. In casinos, newcomers' luck is often very bad. Yes, Logan smiled perfunctorily and turned to look out the window. The highway leading to Las Vegas is obviously much busier than other sections, and all kinds of vehicles are heading towards the dreamy city with all their strength. By the time Logan and the others arrived at the warehouse where the mission ended, it was already evening. This is a stately warehouse in the north of Las Vegas with a clear Lawrence family logo. It seems to store a lot of valuables and is very strictly guarded. Handing the truck over to warehouse staff, the four headed to a nearby motel. The Lawrence family arranged a place for them to stay there. However, the three Samuels obviously would not spend the night in the hotel. After they took a simple shower in the hotel, they happily ran to the casino, as if the exhaustion of running all night could not stop them from being intoxicated. Logan also went out with them, but chose a different route. He found a nice-looking tavern nearby, ordered a few glasses of wine, and ate a steak. After he was full, he wandered aimlessly in this world-famous city. Compared with Santa Fe, Las Vegas at night seems like a different world. There are simply countless casinos here, and there is an operating casino almost a few hundred meters away. The LED lights hanging outside the casino danced with attractive light, and the soft street lights bloomed with golden light, illuminating the entire city in a golden color. The clean streets are full of pedestrians, some of whom are just tourists. They look around the city and take photos excitedly in front of some beautiful scenery from time to time. Some gamblers are very familiar with this place and run quickly towards their favorite casino. Police patrols passing by from time to time ensured safety on the streets. Compared to the city of Santa Fe, which is full of drug addicts and alcoholics, this dream city is obviously safer. Logan strolled through this golden city, enjoying the rare tranquility. You know, in the night of Santa Fe, people traveling must have at least a knife stuffed in their pockets to protect themselves from drug-addicted lunatics. But everyone who walked by him looked bright and beautiful. They are either wearing custom-made high-end suits or the latest trendy products from fashion magazines. Their hair and beards are neatly combed, and their clothing is just right. In addition, the mechanical watches on the men's wrists and the exquisite jewelry on the women's bodies all highlight their appearance. Their upper-class tastes. On the other hand, Logan, wearing a cheap black suit, messy hair and unkempt beard, made him incompatible with this extravagant scene. Fortunately, he didn't care about other people's eyes, he just looked around at all the new things worth noting. Logan. Suddenly, a low voice came from behind. Logan thought he had been recognized, his heart tightened, and he quickly looked back. Over the years, except for Professor X and Caliban, almost no one has called him this, because only acquaintances know him. Behind him stood a bearded man, wearing a black jacket, standing in the crowd looking at him. The iconic beard and eyes that are as sharp as a tiger and reveal the vicissitudes of life are so familiar that Logan instantly remembers the other person. Saber-toothed tiger, Victor. Jimmy. Victor looked excited, strode forward, opened his arms and hugged Logan, and patted Logan's back excitedly with his generous palm. It's really you. After a brief hug, the two separated. Victor looked at Logan's face and his voice became hoarse. Oh my God, you are so old. I almost didn't recognize you. You look much younger. Logan smiled bitterly. The other party also had a self-healing factor. But without the poison of adamantium alloy, Victor's self-healing factor did not decline as quickly as his own. Although he was a bit old, he was much better than his own. However, although their appearance had changed, the familiar aura on the other's body still allowed them to identify each other's identity at a glance. I just didn't expect that Nevada is so big that they would meet by such a chance. Similar to the Wolverines in most other universes, everyone in the world may have forgotten Jimmy, but only Logan will not forget it. He is Wolverine's only blood relative in the world. Now Logan is no exception. Before he awakened his mutant powers, he was the heir to a farm, and Victor was the gardener's son. Later, Logan accidentally bumped into the gardener who killed his father. In a rage, he awakened his abilities and killed the gardener. Afterwards, he learned that he was also the illegitimate son of his mother and the gardener, and that Victor was his half-brother. Later, in order to avoid capture, the two left the farm to live together, and participated in World War I and World War II together, relying on their mutant abilities to kill everyone on the battlefield. When Logan first time traveled, he spent some time with Victor. Although Victor had a bad temper and was even indifferent to human life, Victor cared deeply about Logan. It wasn't until decades ago that the two parted ways, and they never crossed paths again. They never expected to meet in Las Vegas. With no news for so long, I thought you would never come back while you were in the Middle East. Logan happily patted Victor on the shoulder. Where have you been all these years? Victor smiled and shook his head, pointing to a small apartment in front. My home is nearby, let's go have a few drinks together. Too many things have happened in the past few years, and I can't finish talking in 2 or 3 sentences. Okay, I happen to have time. Even if I drink all night, it won't affect me. Logan smiled and nodded in agreement. When old friends get together, they do need a few glasses of wine to tell the story. Victor took Logan to his apartment, and explained on the way, after I separated from you, I have been hanging around in various mercenary groups, and I have done well. I even set up a small mercenary group to wander around all over the world. Victor talked as he walked, fascinated by the past scenery. Later, Victor continued to speak. What happened in Westchester was very big. You should also know that after that, the government began to target mutants. My mercenary group was dispersed. I was also forced to flee. Oh, it was a difficult time. While talking, Victor led Logan into a remote alley. I originally wanted to seek revenge from government officials. Those politicians ruined my life, but with the emergence of genetically modified foods, my abilities have also changed. Degeneration has occurred, and now I can no longer withstand 20 minutes of being shot like I could on the battlefield, so I am forced to terminate my revenge. While they were talking, the two of them walked into a very old-looking apartment. All the facilities seemed to be from 70 or 80 years ago. Victor opened the door to a room, and there was a smell of decay in the small room. The table was filled with empty beer bottles, and the ashtray was filled with cigarette butts. It seemed that Victor was often alone. Drink. Come in. Victor invited Logan in and explained with a smile. It's a bit messy, but we can live in it. While speaking, he swept away the empty wine bottles on the table. Logan looked at this small room and didn't dislike it. He just smiled and said, as long as you can drink. He knew that Victor was wanted now, and it was not easy to rent a house that did not require identification documents. Logan sat down at the table, and Victor took out a stack of cold beer from the refrigerator. The two opened the can, clinked glasses, and took a big gulp. What happened next? How did you come here? Logan asked Victor. Victor sighed and shook his head, looking a little lonely. In order to avoid the government's blockage, I came here after many twists and turns, and now I am working for the local wealthy businessman Mr. Nolan Lander. He is a mean guy. Do they know who you are? Logan asked in surprise, only feeling that the current Victor was not similar to the one he knew well. In the past few decades, this guy may have changed a lot. I'm not as famous as Wolverine. Even if I use my real name, I'm afraid no one will recognize me. Victor smiled, raised the bottle and touched it with Logan. That's all in the past tense. Logan smiled bitterly, raised his head and drank the drink. He was exhausted mentally and physically and said, I hope they forget about me now. If they know that I am here, those fools will come to the door in 3 days, fully armed. Don't worry, the streets are full of Avengers now. Everyone's eyes are attracted to the Avengers. No one knows about Wolverine and the X-Men. While speaking, Victor's eyes dimmed, staring at the bottle of wine in his hand. Nowadays, even the spokesperson on the beer is the Avengers. Do you regret it? Victor suddenly raised his head and stared into Logan's eyes. Logan knew that he was asking if he regretted joining the X-Men. When the government targets mutants, the first ones are naturally the X-Men and Xavier Academy for Geniuses. If Logan had never joined the X-Men and did not have such a great reputation, with his strength, he might not have become as miserable as he is now. Logan stared at the bottle in silence for a long time, shook his head and said, I only regret that I did things the wrong way. While they were chatting, a quick phone call rang. Victor picked up the phone and answered the call. I don't know what was said on the other end of the phone, but Victor's response was only one word, got it. After hanging up the phone, Victor drank the beer in his hand and said a little apologetically, sorry, I have to leave for a while for work reasons. You wait for me here. I will be back in an hour. Quote. You still have to work so late? Logan looked at the time. It was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. Victor sighed helplessly. My boss has a bad debt. The debtor hasn't shown up for several days. I heard that he just went home. If I don't collect it now, I'm afraid I won't be able to find him tomorrow. Hearing this, Logan also stood up. I'll go with you. Anyway, I don't have anything to do now. Victor glanced at Logan and nodded. The two left the apartment and came to a shabby street near the suburbs. This street is very much like the dark side of Las Vegas, with messy roads, dirty garbage everywhere, and a drainage ditch filled with a foul smell. Some sloppy gang members and drug addicts sat casually on the road, looking up at passers-by, and the graffiti on the walls of the street were painted with all kinds of weird things. If Victor didn't look easy to mess with, they might have been surrounded by this group of gangsters. The two stopped in front of a shabby apartment building. That's it. That guy lives on the second floor. Victor's eyes swept back and forth over the dilapidated apartment building. How much does he owe your boss? Logan was curious about how big the debt was that was worth Sabretooth's personal action. 50,000. Victor raised 5 fingers. This guy's name is Elder. He's a gambler. He owed 50,000 in Mr. Notland's casino 3 months ago. Mr. Notland gave him a 3-month deadline, but when the time came, he couldn't find him, and the people downstairs said they had seen him gambling in other casinos. He said in a colder tone, this gambler would rather take the money to other casinos to bet than pay his debts. Logan was silent for a moment. I thought it was 50 million. After all, Sabretooth would never do anything for an unknown person, let alone small matters like debt collection. Victor just shook his head, did not respond, and strode upstairs. Logan followed him and continued to ask, do you usually help Mr. Notland collect debts? This is just one of them. Victor shook his head and said, you know, anything can happen in the casino. I am responsible for handling some chores that are not easy for the police to interfere with. You have changed, Logan said bluntly. You used to be too disdainful to bend down to do these trivial things. Just for a living. Victor's expression was a little gloomy. You should know that it is difficult for me to find a decent job with my identity. As they spoke, the two came to a big door. This is it. Victor stretched out his hand and knocked on the door hard. The whole door was shaking and dust kept falling. He said fiercely, Elder, open the door, I know you are in there. Boom, boom, boom. The knock on the door was extremely loud, and Victor kept shouting at the door, Elder, you know my methods. If you don't open the door, I will make tonight a past event that you never want to remember. But there was still no response from the door. Even when looking through the peephole, one could only see the darkness of the room, and even the lights were not turned on. Not at home. Logan looked at the room where no one responded. It seems your boss's information is wrong. No, there is a sound. Victor put his ear against the door, and his clear senses allowed him to hear subtle movements inside the door. In an instant, Victor's face showed a fierce look. This guy wants to escape. After saying that, Victor quickly took 2 steps back, pushed his shoulders and pushed hard towards the door. Bang! The weak wooden door was instantly knocked open. Logan turned on the switch on the wall, and the headlights of the house came on. Victor's eyes were fixed on a white man who was standing on the balcony and about to escape through the window. He was disheveled and most of his body was already leaning out. Adele, don't even think about leaving. Victor rushed up like a bullet. Seeing Victor rushing towards him, Adele's expression suddenly changed, and without any time to hesitate, he jumped out of the window completely and hit the garbage pile downstairs heavily. He kicked the garbage away from his feet and ran out of the alley. When Victor saw this, he didn't hesitate, jumped down, and followed closely behind him. Logan stood by the window and looked at the two figures, then took another look at the height. In the past, such a height would have been easy for him, but now he was a little worried that his body and bones would not be able to withstand it. Seeing that the two were about to run away, Logan took a deep breath and jumped down, chasing after Victor. Stop, you can't escape. Victor shouted angrily at Adele, his steps getting faster and faster. Adele looked panicked, kept looking back to check the distance between the two sides, and shouted, Stop chasing, give me a few more days, and I will definitely collect enough money. Victor said no more, and flew up like a tiger. His broad body directly pressed Adele under him, grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, with his knee on his back. Adele complained endlessly from the pain of falling to the ground and having his arm twisted. No, 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 please be gentle, your hand is about to break. Adele had a crying look on his face, and his thick black eyes looked like he hadn't slept for several days in a row. His body also exuded an unpleasant smell of sweat. It was obvious that he had stayed up late at the casino these days. Victor didn't talk nonsense, and hit his back hard with his huge fist, making Adele scream for mercy. After a period of beating with fists, Victor reached into his pocket and took out more than 1,000 yuan in cash. That's it. Victor looked at the money in his hand. This is not even enough for interest. This is all my wealth. Even if you kill me, it won't be gone. Adele was crying a little, and Victor's knee pressed on his back, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Victor frowned and glanced at a watch on Adele's wrist. It was one of the few things this guy had that was worth a lot of money. He pulled off the watch fiercely, then stood up in disgust, and said fiercely, "You'd better get the money together quickly, otherwise I will take away at least one of your arms next time I come here." After saying that, he stuffed his money and watch into his pockets and turned around to leave. At this time, Adele, who was on the ground, grabbed Victor's trousers, knelt on the ground, and said with tears streaming down his face, "Please, leave me a few $100. I feel very good recently. In the past 2 days, no, I will definitely win all the money back in one day." Victor looked back at him and kicked him away hard. "Get out of here, or your legs will be ruined." His ferocious expression was like a tiger sighting its prey. Adele seemed to sense the murderous intention in Victor, and was so frightened that he didn't dare to stay any longer, and quickly got up and ran away. Logan looked at Adele, who was running away, and joked, "You are quite skilled in your business." He has no sympathy for gamblers, they are a bunch of lunatics. Victor didn't care. That's how it is with these guys. They will never think of paying back the money until there are no missing parts in their bodies. After that, he walked out of the street. "Let's go, I still have to give the money to Mr. Notland." Under the leadership of Victor, the two came to a small casino. Mr. Notland is a well-known wealthy businessman around here. He runs several small casinos and serves mostly ordinary people. Victor walked towards the casino, while not forgetting to introduce Logan next to him. Standing at the entrance of the casino were 2 bodyguards wearing black suits and standing tall. They were obviously very familiar with Victor and said with a smile, "Victor, you are finally here. The boss is waiting for you on the 2nd floor." After saying that, they noticed Logan following Victor and asked cautiously, "Who is this?" Victor introduced, "This is my friend James, who came to play with me for a few days." The bodyguard nodded, looked at Logan, and after thinking that this old man who looked to be in his 60s did not pose any threat, he smiled and said, "Go in, your friend can play on the 1st floor if he is interested, tonight the place is quite lively." Victor nodded silently, and the two walked into the casino together. Yaiko is a lively gambling place. Crazy gamblers are shouting around the gambling tables and throwing chips in their hands. The harsh sound makes people feel uncomfortable. The two did not stop and went straight to the 2nd floor and came to an office. "Wait for me here, I will be out soon," Victor said, then knocked on the door of the office and walked in. Logan stood in the corridor outside and looked around. Compared with the chaos of the casino below, it seems very quiet here. The best sound insulation materials can block all the sounds on the 1st floor. There is also a window on the side of the corridor that can see outside. Under the window is a clear river. The prosperous buildings of Las Vegas are reflected on the river. The golden-colored lights make the whole river golden, as if it is a flowing golden river. The scenery is pretty good. Logan stood in front of the window and looked at the scenery outside. Bang! Suddenly, there was a dull sound of smashing the table in the office, and a fierce curse. 1,000 yuan, what can 1,000 yuan do? That kid owes 50,000 yuan. If you can't get it back, will you pay it back? I don't look like someone who needs this 1,000 yuan. Victor, remember, I'm the one who feeds you. If you keep doing things perfunctorily like this, then get out of here. I don't want to support a good-for-nothing like you. Where's that kid? What? You actually let him go? Are you a pig? Before you let him go, can you use your donkey-like head to think about it? If you let him go now, where will you find him next time? What about my 50,000 yuan? Oh my God, Victor, did I hear correctly? How much is his apartment worth? Even the homeless people despise it. Do you expect him to come back? I really overestimated you. You are such a brainless rubbish. It is hard for me to regard you as a human being. Even if you catch him and send him to the black mine, you can make up for some losses. But you let him go. Do you have a pile of shit on your shoulder? Quote. Listening to the voice inside, Logan clenched his fist helplessly and walked to the door. He would go in to support Victor after he started fighting. He knew his brother's character very well. At that moment, his irritable mood was like a powder keg. Let alone humiliation, even if others spoke loudly to him, he would stretch out his tiger claws to tear the other party to pieces. Logan thought that this conflict tonight was probably inevitable. But what surprised Logan was that after waiting for a few minutes, not only did he not hear any fighting sounds, but even Victor's rebuttal did not come out. He was like a child in training, and he did not respond at all. After 5 minutes, Notland finally cursed out all the dirty words in his stomach, and then Victor's response came from inside. Sorry, sir, I promise there won't be a next time. That voice was respectful and humble. Logan even felt that there was something wrong with his ears. How could this be what Victor would say? Go away. If you do this again next time, you don't have to come back. The last conversation was Notland's order to expel him. Click. Victor pushed the door and walked out. There was no extreme emotion on his face. He just said lightly, "Let's go." Logan looked at Victor's appearance, hesitant to speak, and even a little distressed in his eyes. He didn't know what Victor had experienced in the past few decades. He used to be a killing god on the battlefield, and his name was enough to scare the enemy into incontinence on the spot. But only more than 10 years have passed, and the Victor in his heart has disappeared, replaced by a guy who is willing to endure abuse, and even insulted by others without refutation. If Victor was a sharp blade before, he is now just a smooth pebble. At this moment, Logan knew that Victor had really changed. After leaving the casino in Notland, Logan and Victor returned to the apartment to drink all night and chat about each other's past until the early hours of the morning. At noon, Logan was awakened by a call from Samuel, who urged him to go back quickly because the goods had been unloaded and they had to start their return journey. Before leaving, Logan left Victor his phone number, hoping to keep in touch with Victor. Back to the previous warehouse, Samuel and the other two obviously did not sleep all night, but there was no fatigue on their faces. The overnight gambling made them look very excited. The way back to Santa Fe was much easier than the way here. Without the goods on the car, the burden was less, and Logan did not need to be as cautious and tense as when he set out. After a day of galloping, he still only walked half the distance. This time, Logan was no longer demanding. He found a hotel to rest for a night and set off again after getting enough energy. After leaving Nevada and returning to the deserted road in Santa Fe, the temperature became noticeably hotter. Logan looked up at the scorching sun hanging in the sky and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Even though it was almost autumn, the temperature in Santa Fe was still high, but fortunately Logan had adapted. On the way, Logan chatted with Samuel about some trivial matters. It was not until the evening that the four of them officially returned to San Antonio and returned to the logistics warehouse of the Lawrence family. However, they did not see Chris at the first time. After Samuel's phone call, they learned that Chris had something to do today, but the other party had sent a special person in charge to give them money and asked them to wait there. The few people had no objection and waited at the door of the warehouse smoking cigarettes for nearly an hour before they saw the person in charge who was late. The reward of $20,000 per person did not increase because Logan was the leader. Touching the thick envelope and confirming that the amount inside was correct, Logan could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. This mission was completely over. Aren't you curious about what we delivered? Samuel counted the money and asked Logan who was about to leave. When they first took the mission, they were very curious about the goods in the truck, but due to Chris's instructions, they never opened it without permission. Not interested. Logan shook his head indifferently. I only take money to do things, and I don't care about other things. He is not a young man. Nearly 200 years of experience has made him develop the habit of never meddling in other people's affairs. Many things may not need to be cleared away. Well, actually we don't know what it is. Samuel shrugged, put the envelope into his pocket, and whispered, but the reward is so high every time, I guess the things inside must be not simple, and may even be contraband. A 3 or 4 day trip can get a few months' reward for ordinary people. Even a fool knows that the things inside are definitely not good things. But although they are curious, years of adventure have also made them know that it is better to have less trouble than more trouble, and it is better not to know many things. And Chris knew the details of their trips every time afterwards, which also made Samuel understand that there must be Chris's spies in the team. Maybe. Logan shrugged indifferently and turned to walk out of the warehouse door. He was too lazy to waste his brain on these unimportant things. As long as the money was in hand, he didn't plan to stay. Walking out of the warehouse, he found the Chrysler that was previously stored here in the open-air parking lot outside. San Antonio has a strong wind and sand. Even if it is just a simple stay here for a few days, the surface of the car will be covered with a thick layer of yellow sand. Logan washed the car simply with the automatic washing device beside the parking lot, and then went straight to the supermarket. Because of the financial difficulties, their expenses were very low before, and many daily necessities at home were in short supply. The daily food was just simple butter potatoes, or some cheap milk cereal. Now that he has received a reward of $20,000, although he can't say that he can make himself rich, Logan thinks it is necessary to improve the environment at home a little, at least let the professor and Caliban have a hearty dinner. In the nearby supermarket, Logan bought a lot of things. In addition to some food that he usually couldn't bear to eat, he also bought some daily necessities for the professor and Caliban. After stuffing everything into the trunk, he drove out of the border and entered the familiar dilapidated factory. It was almost dusk at this time, and the sun that disappeared into the horizon left a red afterglow all over the sky. The evening wind whistled in the desert, and the fine sand swept like raindrops. The abandoned factory, which no one takes care of, looks extremely old in such an environment. Many wooden doors and windows have decayed, the completely abandoned factory buildings around are full of rust, and many buildings that cannot bear the weight have completely collapsed. I have to change to a better environment in the future. Logan looked at the deserted factory and murmured in a low voice. This place is not only in a bad environment, but also has a large temperature difference between day and night. The scorching heat during the day can make the temperature here approach 50 degrees. If you put an egg on the sand in the morning, you can eat a well-cooked, sand-boiled egg in the evening. And the terrifying low temperature at night is comparable to the arrival of winter. If you are a young person, you may be able to tolerate such a harsh environment, but now the professor is too old, and this kind of environment is not suitable for the elderly to live for a long time. But fortunately, these days are coming to an end soon. As long as he takes another mission from Chris, he will have enough capital to lead the professor out of this ghost place. Just when Logan was looking forward to the future, the 2 black cars parked neatly outside the factory instantly broke his fantasy. Logan's expression suddenly changed. He quickly stopped the car, carefully got out of the car and checked the 2 cars. At first glance, you can tell that these 2 cars are expensive, and they are obviously cars for wealthy people. Why would a wealthy person patronize such a shabby-looking factory? Logan frowned and noticed the license plates of the 2 cars, which were local brands in Santa Fe City. After seeing the license plate clearly, he relaxed slightly. Fortunately, it's not Donald. With a murmur, Logan no longer hesitated and rushed directly into the factory. The dark factory building was lit by an incandescent lamp hanging from the ceiling. Under the incandescent lamp, Caliban sat on the sofa tremblingly, his neck curled up, his face full of fear. Behind him, 3 sturdy bodyguards in black suits stood side by side, looking meticulous. Opposite Caliban, a familiar figure sat. He sat comfortably on the sofa, with his hands spread out and resting on the back of the sofa, his legs crossed, and looking at Caliban opposite with a smile. It wasn't until the sound of Logan opening the door came that he turned around with a smile and looked at Logan with squinted eyes. "James, you are finally back. How is the mission?" "Everything went well." Logan frowned. "Chris, why are you here?" Sitting on the sofa, holding Caliban in check, was none other than Chris Lawrence. Logan didn't expect that the Lawrence family would find this place. You know, since he became an Uber driver, his car has been his home all year round. He rarely comes back except when he needs to provide supplies here. But even though they were so careful, they were still discovered by the Lawrence family. And It's not a good thing when Chris comes to visit. After a whole day of exposure to the sun, the entire factory was filled with dull air. The old electric fan rotates, making a creaking noise, and blows out hot air. James, to be honest, I really spent a lot of effort to find this place. I have to say that this is really not a good place. If you need it, just tell me. I can find it in the best part of the city. I'll arrange a place for you. Chris lowered his crossed legs and kept a smile on his face, but the smile was not gentle, but made people feel dangerous. Logan walked to sit across from Chris and said calmly, "No need." While speaking, he glanced around with his peripheral vision, and he was relieved when he didn't find the professor. The professor is undoubtedly his biggest weakness now. If the other party controls the professor, he will be completely passive. However, the heart that had just been put down was lifted up again by Chris' words. "Don't be so vigilant, James. Just because you don't need it doesn't mean your father doesn't need it. It's not a good idea to let a 90-year-old man live in a water tower like that." Chris stared at James with a smile. The warning in his eyes was very clear. Logan's face instantly darkened, and he clenched his fists tightly, with a few cracks appearing between the fists. "What exactly do you want to do?" After wandering around for many years, how could Logan not hear the warning in the other party's words? There is only one meaning behind Chris' words. "I know your address, and I also know that you have elderly people at home who are unable to resist. Take it easy." Chris smiled and said, "You saved my life, so I think we are friends, and friends will not hurt each other, right? Of course, unless someone betrays our friendship, but I really don't hope saw that scene." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand, and a bodyguard took out a palm-sized exquisite gift box from his arms and placed it respectfully in Chris's hand. "And I heard that this escort mission would not be possible without you. To express our gratitude, the family has specially prepared a gift for you." Chris gently handed the gift box to Logan. "This is something we prepared carefully. It matches your identity very well." Logan didn't reach out, just stared into Chris's eyes, his face full of vigilance. The dark red gift box is specially tied with a delicate knot of red silk, just like those extremely exquisite gift packages in luxury stores. "Open it, Logan." Chris always had a smile on his face, as if he only had this expression, but his voice was extremely cold when he spoke. "You knew my identity from the beginning." When he heard his name, Logan was startled. All the muscles in his body were tense, his fists were clenched, and the steel claws between his finger bones were about to come out. This time, Logan was completely wrong. He had been wandering around Santa Fe City for many years, and no one recognized him, which made him mistakenly believe that the world had really forgotten Wolverine. But obviously, this is not the case. In response to Victor's words, Wolverine's name is so big that even if the name has been dusted for decades, some people will still remember it. When Wolverine is still useful, he will always be remembered. "No." Chris smiled and shook his head. "I initially thought you were a very good thug, but my father knew you. When he was young, photos of you mutants would appear on the headlines of newspapers from time to time." Chris put the gift box on the table, stood up, patted his pants, and said with a smile, "Don't be so nervous. I am here just to give you a gift. I will inform you when there is a new task next time. I saved your phone number, remember? But if you can't get through, I may have to call again." After speaking, he waved and led the people out of the factory. Seeing Chris going out, Caliban rushed to the kitchen immediately, picked up the shotgun from a hidden corner, ran to the door with the gun in his hand, locked the door, and looked out through the peephole vigilantly. It wasn't until Chris's two cars parked outside the factory started and drove away from the factory that Caliban breathed a long sigh of relief and walked back to Logan. Logan looked at the exquisite gift box on the table and opened it carefully. There was a silver revolver in the gift box. The exquisite workmanship made it look like a handicraft. The silver-plated casing shone white under the light. There were 3 exquisite silver-white bullets beside the pistol. Logan threw the gift box and the pistol back on the table. He knew that Chris was a naked threat. "Logan, you told me there wouldn't be any trouble." Caliban stood in front of Logan angrily, "But now someone knows that the professor is here, knows that you are here, and has even come to the door. If more people know about it, we may be killed by 2 people in our sleep. Send an RPG to blow him up." "Calm down." Logan snatched the shotgun from Caliban's hand and said solemnly, "They won't do anything to us in a short time." If he wanted to kill him, Chris would not be here tonight. He would only need to report their location to the government departments. A large number of heavily armed soldiers and helicopter gunships would immediately surround the place. Now Chris is obviously going to use himself to help him. Not now, doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. Caliban's face was full of panic. "Logan, we have to pack our things. Tomorrow, no, tonight we will escape from here. This place is already full of dangers. We can be at risk at any time. It's possible to get caught." With that said, Caliban even went to prepare his luggage. "Don't be so impulsive." Logan grabbed Caliban and said, "Believe me, I can handle this." Caliban still looked horrified. "I was pinned down on the sofa by 3 people just now. The pistols on their waists could kill me at any time. How can I calm down?" He stared at Logan, his whole body trembling uncontrollably, fear lingering in his heart. "If we run away now, it will only be more dangerous." Logan responded calmly. Now it is obvious that Chris will not expose himself. As long as those guys can profit from Wolverine, they will not fall out so quickly. But Logan also understands that his life must not always be controlled by others. Otherwise, once they lose their value, Chris and the others will deal with themselves as soon as possible. And if they escape directly now, what awaits them is not the Lawrence family, but a comprehensive siege by government departments. The risk at that time will be tens of millions of times higher. When Caliban heard this, he sat dejectedly on the sofa with his head buried in his hands and a look of pain on his face. He just wants to live his life in peace, and he never wants to touch dangerous things. "Logan." Charles came in from the back door in a wheelchair, "Is the guy just now your boss?" He controlled the wheelchair and came to Logan, splayed on the wheelchair, "That guy is not a good person." "I know, don't worry." Logan reached out and patted the back of the professor's hand, "I will take care of everything. Don't worry, nothing will happen." Charles didn't respond, just looked at Logan quietly. Although Logan's words were relaxed, the current situation was obviously quite a challenge for him. "It really doesn't work, let me." Before Charles could finish speaking, Logan quickly raised his head to stop him. He stared into the professor's eyes and shook his head. Logan understood what the second half of the professor's words meant, "Let me kill them all." Single quote. "Not yet, Charles." Logan shook his head firmly, "That will only lead to greater danger. If we really do that, it won't be just the Lawrence family who knows about us." Now that his strength has deteriorated greatly, he knows full well the consequences of being targeted by government agencies, which will definitely lead to an irreversible outcome. Charles looked at Logan's firm eyes and wanted to say something else. But Logan didn't give him a chance to speak. He turned to Caliban and said, "I bought a lot of things. They are in the trunk. You come with me to get them. We can have a sumptuous dinner tonight." After saying that, he turned to the professor and said, "Professor, you go to the sofa and watch a movie. Let us forget about tonight's events for the time being. Believe me, I can settle everything." Charles looked at Logan's appearance and had no choice but to shut up. Logan and Caliban took everything Logan bought out of the trunk of the car. He bought a lot of good food, and with Caliban and his careful cooking, the rich aroma of the food soon filled the factory. The aroma that filled the room relieved everyone's irritable hearts. The 3 of them temporarily forgot about Chris' worries and devoted themselves to the sumptuous dinner. The rare delicacies whetted the appetites of the 3 of them, and it took more than an hour to finish the rare dinner. After letting the professor take the medicine, Logan pushed him back to the water tower and settled him down. Then he took a simple bath and lay on his bed. This was a small room, with cracked walls leading directly to the wilderness outside. The cold moonlight penetrated the gaps and shone on his body. The gunshot wound in the past few days has not completely healed, and thick blood scabs have condensed on the muzzle. Logan looked at the wounds on his body and exhaled helplessly. Ding dong. The mobile phone on the bedside suddenly lit up. The Uber app received a text message. Logan opened his phone to check and found a strange message. "Have you stopped picking up customers recently?" Looking at this strange news, Logan was surprised. Why would anyone care if an Uber driver picks up a passenger? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.